sure it works.
Well, patiently waiting, call it over here. Alrighty, it is now 4:30. It is October 3rd, 2023. We are Carmel-by-the-Sea City Council. Nova, could I get a roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Barron?
Here.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Here.
Councilmember Ferlito? Councilmember Ferlito?
Well, let's wait until we add her. Okay.
She is unmuted. Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Here.
Mayor Potter?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, first is we need a request to approve Councilmember Ferlito's continued participation by just course per government section 54953F. Can we get a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion to approve Councilmember Ferlito not being here.
I'll second it.
No, could we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Jeff, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. Thank you all for coming. Under extraordinary business, we have the high school report out. Is there anybody from the high school here to report out today? Not seeing anybody. All right, well, why don't we move on then to recognition of the visitor volunteers in public service, police service. Chief, are you going to do a little presentation here?
Yes.
Thank you, appreciate it. Incredible group, by the way.
Thank you. Members of the council, mayor, city administrator. I'd like to recognize our VIPS program today, which stands for our Volunteers in Police Services. Our VIPS program is a national program that was established in 2002 under President George W. Bush after 9/11 to encourage the use of volunteers in our communities. It is management by the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the United States Department of Justice. So we've had our Carmel VIPS program since 2006, which was started under Chief George Brosson, who wanted the VIPS to be city ambassadors, really display what we have to offer to all of the community, as well as extra eyes and ears to support the police department. So the VIPS program has been supported by every chief since that time. It initially began with 7 VIPs. By 2008, it was down to only 1 VIP, which is Lee Whitney. She worked alone for over a year while the other VIPs were being added. And during that time, it was kind of important, and it's near and dear to my heart because I was actually here when we did this, is we named her Queen 1. So when you have a Queen designation, is we use it for special services, for our VIPS program. And it was really an honor to be here to be able to name her that. So that was kind of a treasure for me. But I'm gonna call out each name one by one. You guys could please stand when I call out your name. I'd like to recognize the years of service that you've been with us. So Lee Whitney, she's been with us since 2006 and has 17 years of service with us. Queen 2, Jim Dallas. Been with us since 2015, has 8 years of service. And Queen 3, Bob Gotch. 2015, 8 years of service. Queen 4, Joanne Noto. She's been with us since 2016, has 7 years of service. And while she's standing, I want to offer this pin to Joanne because she's had 500 hours of voluntary service for us since then. And this is amazing. Queen 5, Deanna Dickman. So Deanna is our co-coordinator of the program. She really has the spirit and passion to keep this program running and is my second hand with it. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. What you do for this program is truly amazing. And you've had 6 years of service. Queen 6, Diana Waller. Also our co-coordinator for the program. Been with us as long as Deanna has, and like I said, my sentiments echo for what you've done for this program. It's truly amazing. And you've been with us since 2017. You have 6 years of service. Queen 7 is Caroline Profeta. Unfortunately, she's on vacation. She's not here today, but she has 1 year of service, and I was going to give her a 100-hour pin, which she gathered 100 hours in 1 year. It's truly phenomenal. And Queen 9, David O'Neill, our newest member, been here since 2023. Thank you. Oops. I skipped one. I am so sorry. Queen 8. All forward. Finished in 2022, 1 year of service. I'm very sorry, sir. I didn't see you over there. And while I have you all standing, I'd like to have Lee come up to the podium here. For your years of service to Lee, we got you a plaque here because all your people that you work with on a daily basis out here really came together, and we took a vote, and you were our volunteer of the year. That would like to come up and say hello. They'll introduce themselves, and they have a plaque for you as well.
So Mayor, members of the council, I come here representing Assemblymember Don Addis, who represents Assembly District 30, joined by my colleague Mauricio Arias. And on behalf of the state of California and the 30th Assembly District, we thank you for your 17 years of service, but not only that, for your unwavering commitment to public safety and community through the Volunteers in Police Service program. So the Assembly member wasn't able to be here. She's on official business, but she sends her best, and we honor you with very much open arms, and thank you so much for your service.
Alex, thank you so much for being here. Wonderful. Alex, again, thank you for taking your time. Make sure the council, the assembly member appreciates your commitment. We really do appreciate it.
Will do.
Thank you
Will
very
do.
much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And just to finish in conclusion here, so Lee was our first VIP. It was given the call sign of Victor 1 originally. When it was changed to Queen 1 in 2007, partially by me and by the old chief that was here. So Lee has been a VIP for 17 years and fully earned the title of Queen 1. She has trained many of our VIPs and is known for her great sense of humor when dealing with the public and managing challenging traffic situations, which was on point when we had some issues right next door here. So thank you so much for your help there. Besides being a VIP, Lee has been in public management and challenging traffic situations throughout her career here. And she's also been serving on various boards such as American Red Cross, Carmel hosts Lions Club, Meals on Wheels, and serves as a president. Congratulations. She has won multiple awards such as Lions of the Year, Woman of the Year, Monterey Peninsula, and Melvin Jones Humanitarian Award. She has been the hole captain at the AT&T golf tournament since 1998 and a team leader for the Big Sur Marathon. Lee is a force of nature and seems to have endless energy. She works every shift of traffic control for the city during the Women's U.S. Open and a total of 28 hours in 3 days. She worked 19 hours in 2 days during Car Week this year. Not surprisingly, Lee Whitney has been chosen by her peers to be recognized as the 2023 winner of the Donald Bowman Volunteer Service Award. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you all very much. It's been a great honor to be an ambassador for the city of Carmel and to interact with its residents and visitors. And I don't have 17 more years to give, obviously, but I hope I can still be in there and contribute being an ambassador to the city of Carmel. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lee.
And one thing I forgot to mention is that we do have individual certificates for all the volunteers in the program. So if it would be possible for everyone to join me for a group picture, and I can have the police officer hand them out at a later time as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Come on, let's get a group shot. Yeah, okay. Then I think Councilmember Ferlito would like to say something too. All right. Karen, did you want to say something for Councilmember Ferlito? You're muted.
Yes, I really wanted to be there today, but I can't. But I did want to congratulate all of you for your service and tell you that we see you out there. We see you and we appreciate you, and we know that you are really helping our police department. So I want to thank Chief Watkins for the nice presentation, and I want to thank Alexis and Assemblymember Addis for that special recognition as well. We have very special volunteers in this city, and I just wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. And
Thank you, Karen.
congratulations.
Bobby, you and I had an interesting interaction with him when we had the commencement parade, the homecoming parade. That was great.
Yeah, they were in action. These two were in act, Queen 5 and Queen 6, I think, right? You guys were in action on that homecoming parade.
All right, well, thank you all very much. Okay. Why don't we move on then to a public appearances items? This is an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, Jesus, skipped over. Thank you for the Petrosky Harbor Spring Community Foundation's dedication of $7,500 donation to the police department. Chip?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to speak to this briefly. Chief Watkins and I met Catherine, Nicola, her husband, and Blitzen, their dog, several months ago. And we had a great series of meetings with them. They're relatively new to our community. And they were generous enough to donate $7,500 to the police department in appreciation of Chief Watkins for his service. And I just wanted, we accepted the donation, the council did at our last meeting, but I just wanted to do a quick shout out to that family as well. That money will be used to purchase new police vehicles, which the council approved last night. So again, I just wanted a hearty thank you to Catherine, Nicola, Blitzen, Sebastiani, who live in the Northeast neighborhood. Thank you so much.
Well done, Chip. Much appreciated. Okay, again, this is a public appearance item. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. The 3-minute limitation on the testimony. State your name for the record. I'd appreciate it.
Good evening, Nancy Toomey with my Carmel Residents Association board hat on. I wanted to extend a welcome opportunity for residents of the full peninsula area to an event that Carmel Residents Association is hosting on Monday, October 23rd. From 7 to 8 o'clock. It's hosting not you lovely folks who we've voted into office, but some of the other folks that represent us in Sacramento, specifically Don Addis and John Laird will be there to talk to us about the latest legislation in the housing topic, which is quite active in our community right now. And we'd like to make sure that we fill the room. It's up at the high school in the Center for Performing Arts. And please visit the Carmel Residents Association website to register to participate. So it's carmelresidents.org. Thank you very much and welcome, and hope to see all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to testify tonight?
Good evening, Ken White. I'd like to donate some money to the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea. I'd like to point out that we need to buy a wrestling official's shirt, a white shirt with stripes and a police whistle, and donate it to the planning director for the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea.
Thank you, Ken. All righty. No physical, no noise, thank you. Okay, is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? An item that's not on tonight's agenda? Anybody in the room? Looking, is there anybody in Zoom world? Patricia Harrington, I think you've got your hand up. Oh, I'm sorry. There's somebody here present.
Hi, public comment, right?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm a plumber in Carmel, Monterey area, and I guess it's my way of voicing it. I do sewer lateral work. It's required in the city, and normally the permit prices are $300 for a COD permit and $250 for an encroachment permit with the city. On September 9th, they were raised from $300 to $800, and I don't know what the 280% increase was. I don't see a way that's it's justified by that, and I think it should. I mean, maybe not $800, but if it went up maybe $50, I'd say that'd be reasonable. When I talked to the city, I didn't get a good response from them, and I hope there's something we can do about it other than an $800 increase in a permit that's not there, where it's a forced issue. I mean, they make them to replace the sewers, and then to have to charge that $800 is pretty high. That's all I got.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate your testimony. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Daisy Rose, R-O-S-E. I wanted to speak on the incident that has occurred between Mr. Ray Rigg and my husband. In my entire time knowing Craig, I've never seen him be violent. He was a speaker for 22 years. As you all must know, speaking and giving forth your perspective, you will not be liked by everyone. It comes with the territory, I guess. I don't know, because I'm not a speaker. Doing it right now is a little terrifying for me. But, so my husband is a very passionate man with a unique perspective, and he's not afraid to speak up and stand up. It's how he made his livelihood for however long in his life. He has always used his words. I've never seen him once be violent, ever, in my entire time knowing him. Never seen him as much as make a fist at someone, but he will stand strong, but never violent. I'd also like to say that he has told me, and it's documented, that he has had head injuries before, concussions before, and we've never gone on a roller coaster ride together. Certain things we don't do because he's very protective of his head, and that is well documented. On Thursday, he was assaulted by Chip, Ray Rigg, and he took a blow to the left side of his head and eye. I took him to the hospital the next day because he woke up with concussion symptoms. He has received a CAT scan and seen an eye doctor and has been told to rest and stay at home. And we have retained Lizelle Signan Brandt at Signan Law to represent us as we press charges against Chip and the City of Carmel. Thank you.
Thank you, Daisy. Appreciate your testimony. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Anybody else in the room here wishing to speak tonight before I go to Zoom land?
I've heard the story and I've seen the video, and I find this a disgrace.
Could we get your name for the record? I'm sorry.
Allie Minor.
Okay, thank you.
And I find this a disgrace for a city official to be involved in a physical altercation with a young business owner here in town who seems to be a delightful person. And I think he should step down from his office.
Thank you, Ally. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Last call in the room here. Okay, I'll go out to Zoom world. I do see two hands. I've got Patricia Harrington, maybe. Patricia, if you would like to speak, and then followed by Logan Miles, I guess. Miles Anderson. Allison. Patricia, floor is yours.
Yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mayor Potter and council members. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak for just a couple of minutes. I had intended to speak via Zoom at your last meeting when the issue of amending the general plan for the Pine Inn was discussed. Unluckily for me, my internet access went out at exactly the moment you were addressing it. Fortunately, I was able to watch the replay on TV, and I thank you for making that service available. I do, however, wish to ask you to reconsider your comments made at that time in order to save your staff time and effort, as well as to help the Pine Inn and the city work towards solutions for the reuse of the property that are more in keeping with the general plan and the history, charm, and character of the city of Carmel. Initially, I was considering the impact on a personal basis on that little historic cottage across the street from the project. But having had more time to look at the plans, especially the zoning guidelines and the community plan guidelines, I'm now convinced that this is not the best plan for us or for that corner of the city, for the commercial area of the city, or for any resident or visitor to the city. Please know that we are not opposed to the residential redevelopment of that lot. We know that this particular site has been identified by the city as a location that should be considered for residential development. And I believe that the R4 zone would allow 6 units of residential housing or up to 8 units of affordable housing. And these would be units where there were owners or renters, and we know there's a need for this. Clearly, I don't have the time tonight to discuss the Pine Inn plans and the inconsistencies with the general plan or zoning, but I would like to point out that the current proposal would actually be a major expansion of a commercial use into the residential area. The units will function as daily rental units and expand congestion, noise, lights, traffic, etc. into the residential area, similar to Airbnb units, and in this case, similar to 6 Airbnb units right across the street. Just briefly, other major consistencies include the setback requirements, the parking requirements, the proposal to simply cover the parking garage to gain greater height and views for the hotel units, and to have the parking garage proposal which foresees a 70-foot long by 10-foot high wall, a scale and mass unthinkable in that location. I ask that you consider these comments and red light this project rather than proceeding. Thank you for your consideration and for your stewardship of the city of Carmel. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, Patricia. Logan, Logan Miles Allison, you have the floor.
Yes, sir. My name is Logan Miles Allison. I don't know if my my video is working because the host will not let me. She actually, or whoever's the host, kicked me out earlier, and then I had to re-get back in, and they're not letting me show my face. But I'm an independent artist. I was there a couple weeks ago in person, and today I would be there if I could be. But I'm in Tennessee right now, late for another meeting because this is so important. But I've traveled around the world, and I've gotten to see places grow for the better. I've gotten to see them fall for the worst. And like I said, I've grown up underneath my father, who's one of the Fortune 500 companies, and America's oil company. I endorse goodness when I speak. I endorse truth when I speak. And a few weeks ago, like I said, I heard nothing but a bunch of rambling from the council, which is like loud shotguns going off. It's just a bunch of loud noise. So today, before everything starts up, let's keep it super simple. Simplicity comes with authority, and it's like a rifle, right? It's very powerful, it's very true and to the point. So today, if the council could not get sidetracked on the background noise within themselves and listen to the city, that would be absolutely awesome. And when everything else comes up, I'll be back to speak. But that is it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to testify tonight? I don't see anybody. I'll close the public comment period, and then we'll move on to council comments. First, let's go with the city administrator. Chip?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No announcements or comments.
City attorney, anything to report? Mr. Pierick?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would just like to report that we did have a closed session on Friday afternoon, the 29th, and also yesterday, and there is no reportable action from those closed sessions.
Councilmember comments, am I right? Councilmember Richards?
I'll just say congratulations to Carmel High football team. What a game I saw the other day. It's Saturday. Dave and I went to the game, and it's worth watching. Those kids are doing great. And then they also had 2 first-place finishers in the cross country, both male and female.
I concur with that. That was an incredible game. I've never seen such an incredible comeback. Amazing. To my left, Jeff? Alessandra?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have an update on the Flock Police Camera Ad Hoc Committee meeting. 2 weeks ago, Councilmember Richards, the City Administrator and Police Chief, and I took a field trip to all 28 locations of the proposed Flock cameras. We evaluated the placement of the cameras and their visual impact on the surrounding area. We determined the least preferable way of mounting the cameras and the solar panels was on the Flock-provided poles and existing light poles. City staff will explore working with PG&E to co-locate the cameras on existing utility poles if possible, and or working with property owners to have the cameras mounted on existing buildings. Once we have made progress in this outreach, we will hold another ad hoc meeting, and you're always welcome to email Councilman Richards or myself. Thank you.
Thank you, and appreciate your subcommittee work on that. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, Karen, do you have anything?
Yes, I'd just like to say, please get your flu shots, your COVID vaccine, and if you need
Spoken
it.
by a true victim. Well done.
I am learning the hard way. I was a week late getting that vaccine. I also would like to thank Public Works. I believe the tank in Mission Trail Nature Preserve is in progress of being removed, and also the pump and so on. That's really good to know. And I talked to Rob Culver today, and they're going to rebuild that small bridge in Mission Trail Nature Preserve. So those are all good things that are happening in our Public Works Department and our Mission Trail Nature Preserve. So thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate your participation despite your illness. All right, why don't we move in then? We'll go into further the business. First item of order of business is receive a presentation by Wave Astound Broadband to introduce a new fiber optic project and authorize issuance of an encroachment permit with special conditions of approval. Bob?
Sebastian, we need to show a presentation from the laptop.
Which one is
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I was going to introduce this item, give a broad overview, and then introduce John Mosher with Wave Broadband to go into more details about this project. First, I wanted to go over some project history. Public Works and Community Planning and Building staff have been meeting with representatives of Wave since 2017. This is not a new project. Over the course of time, there has been various alignments, different phases, different schedules. It was delayed a couple of years during COVID. Also had a lot of changes in their personnel. Earlier this year, we've agreed to a specific alignment. We've identified construction impacts and the mitigation measures for those impacts. And the mitigation measures are what we call special conditions of approval for the encroachment permit. This is not a city project. Wave is a private utility under the Federal Communication Commission and CPUC guidelines. It is my understanding that they have the same rights as a telephone company would, and want more details on that, we can ask the city attorney's office. This is also part of a regional project that you'll see in their map. They've already completed most of Monterey, Pacific Grove, Monterey County, right up to the city limits. When they're done with Carmel, the next would be Pebble Beach. Most of the project is aerial fiber optic cables attached to existing PG&E poles. Wave Broadband will pay to lease those poles, so the poles will remain the property of PG&E, and PG&E has the responsibility as the owner of the poles to keep the tree clearance from all the power lines, including these new fiber lines. There's also a one-block section along San Carlos Street on between just south of Ocean to just south of 7th. And they'll be installing up to 7 guy wires. These have been scrutinized by Planning and Public Works, so we're comfortable with the final locations. In fact, recently we eliminated 2. Some of the key permit issues is that the city finds that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act for Section 15303, Class 3. We did receive an arborist report. There'll be no trees removed as part of this project. There will be minor utility pruning under the direction of the city forester, so that's all been worked out. There's no right-of-way impacts from the city or any resident. Now, Public Works and the Community Planning and Building routinely issue encroachment permits, including for other utilities, so that's common. This one's a bigger project. It's certainly unique, or maybe the first of its kind in Carmel. And in our Carmel Municipal Code, Section 12.08.050, Permit Process and Determination, Part D, paraphrase there, if the proposed encroachment, in the opinion of the city administrator, should be referred to the city council for determination, then the application shall be scheduled for action by the city council. So that's why we're here, is because this is a unique case. And then the last slide, we've developed 38 special conditions of approval for the encroachment permit. These conditions cover administrative matters, environmental issues, and construction issues. Some of the key points is that there'll be a hold harmless agreement. Wave will be paying the city $25,155 in fees. They have traffic control plans that have already been approved for every street that they're working on. They'll have a 24/7 hotline for anyone to call. They'll be giving us updated construction schedules. Wave will also hire a full-time arborist, certified arborist with line clearance certifications for all of their work, all their aerial work through the trees. They'll also be hiring an independent laboratory to test for the San Carlos Street restoration of, they're going to be doing underground boring and jacking, so they'll have bore pits. So all of that work will be restored with an independent lab company to make sure everything is done in accordance with city policies. They are working in a couple of small archaeological zones. They'll have an archaeological monitor if they do any underground work in those sensitive areas. And of course, they have to restore any damaged public or private facilities to city standards or to the satisfaction of the private owner. Now, I want to emphasize, which is why it's bold and centered and underlined, Wave and staff were receptive to refine the conditions based on council and public feedback tonight. In fact, based on comments and questions we received this week, we've just added condition number 39, which is that we will require Wave to convert the lines to go underground if and when the time comes that power and other utilities are going underground as well. Okay, so when PG&E goes underground, essentially Wave will also be going underground. With that, I'd like to turn it over to John Mosher. He's a senior construction manager with Stown Broadband, and then be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you for your time today to present to you our project. Astound, just for some clarification, Astound Broadband is a conglomeration of Wave Communications, Grande, and RCN, which is an East Coast-based company. So all 3 companies combined into Astound Broadband, just for clarification. Astound is the nation's 6th largest telecommunication provider, serving 8 of the top 10 markets in the United States. The company offers residential, business, and enterprise broadband internet services, telephone and cable TV services using our own fiber network. Astound Broadband serves over 1 million customers in the metro areas outlined on the slide, which you can see. Astound reflects both the evolution of the company as well as a vision of the future. That's the three companies combined that I mentioned earlier. This is this slide, which basically shows the evolution of the project. As you can see, the areas outlined in green are all the areas within the Monterey County that we've completed to date. And the area outlined with, as you can see on the legend, Carmel is the area that we need to complete, and then also the area going off to the west. The project consists of connecting high-speed fiber optic cables to existing wireless communication facilities and supportive communication capacity with Carmel-by-the-Sea and surrounding areas. This project represents accumulation of a larger project, which I just showed you in the last slide, throughout the Monterey and Greater Peninsula. The benefits of the project initially are for the wireless communication capacity upgrade to existing sites and increasing the data capacity and ability to offer new and improved services for those sites. Excess capacity of fiber that we're providing, so there's excess fiber capacity in the cable that we're installing, allows for us down to the ability for additional services for the community in the future without upgrading the cables. So there's the capacity to do future upgrades. The scope of the project is to install aerial strand fiber optic cables on the existing utility poles that are out there today, and a small area of underground, which you see outlined in red. The aerial is all the blue, and the underground is the red area outlined on South San Carlos. The project is anticipated to take 3 months from the date of start. We recognize that this is not a typical project for Carmel-by-the-Sea, and we've been working with the city to meet the conditions of approval for the encroachment permit. However, we do recognize that there may be some additional questions or concerns that we may need to answer and continue to work with the city in order to move forward with the project. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bob, did you want to summarize?
Wasn't planning on summarizing, but I certainly can. Again, so we're asking the council to consider these conditions of approval, add, subtract, modify the conditions, and give us the authority to issue the final encroachment permit once they pay the fees and do some of the administrative work that still remains.
Thank you. Is there any questions of Bob by staff before I go to public? Jeff.
Thank you. I have a few questions. When you said at the beginning, condition number 39 was that you would require WAVE to go underground when the city utilities go underground on the route. Does this mean that they'll pay their share of the undergrounding costs, or that they simply won't complain that they'll have to do engineering? Like when we underground, there's going to be a lot of costs to go around to everybody, and people are going to have to pay. So does this mean they will pay for their wires to go underground, or that they simply aren't going to complain that they have to do engineering, but that the city will have to pay the cost?
There's various projects that have various funding mechanisms. They would do their own design. I'll turn it over to John.
Well, I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about the Rule 20A stuff, which we've talked about before.
Right.
I'm talking about this, I don't want to use the word pie in the sky, but this eventual plan to underground all the wires in the city.
Right, we understand that's kind of what condition 39 was all about. I'll turn it over to John to maybe clarify that.
So typically, so as mentioned previously, we're a tenant on the pole. We're a renter from PG&E and AT&T on their poles. And so if there's an undergrounding project that occurs where the city wants all the facilities to go underground, the owner of the pole, whoever that is, will coordinate with their tenants to facilitate moving the facilities underground. And so that would be our only alternative, other than if we had a reroute somewhere that we maybe have done to where we've rerouted our facilities already, and that we don't need to go that route anymore. Those would be the only two two options, right? Is to either participate in the project and go underground, or reroute our services.
So I think what the council member is asking, sir, is will you pay your fair share to put your fiber optic underground when we underground the rest of our utilities?
If we are installing our facilities underground, yes, we will.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, so I assume the part of the permit that clause 39, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's the
We'll use those words.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my other two-part question is this a replacement of copper wire that currently exists on poles, or is this a sort of a new installation of fiber optic wire?
So it's both. So for the wireless communication facilities, it's an upgrade in their services, but it's also with additional capacity to provide fiber optic networks to.
So you're planning on providing services to more customers in Carmel other than the wireless communication facilities that you talked about?
If the constituents of Carmel want our services, we'll be able to provide additional services, yes.
And so in that case, Wave would be sort of the internet service provider instead of Comcast or AT&T or however.
We could be another option other than the existing
okay.
The existing
and
companies.
Then do we have an agreement, like do you currently pay franchise fees? So Wave Telecommunications pays franchise fees already to the city?
If they don't, they'd be charged franchise fees.
And so there's some weird staff method of computing franchise fees that we don't really need to be concerned about, but that when their capacity goes up, their franchise fees would go up, or however it is that works?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions by council members?
I do.
Sure, Alessandra.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, since we already have AT&T and Comcast, which are established large companies, what would happen if Wave goes bankrupt a few years from now and then we're stuck with these wires?
Yeah, that I can't predict that what would happen. I mean, we are the 6th largest provider.
But you're a new company.
Actually, no, we're not a new company. The company's been around. RCN has been around for over 20 years. Wave has been around for about the same length of time. So we're a new company in this market, yes, but we've been around for a long time. Wave has been in the California area for over 20 years.
And then, Bob, this question would probably be for you. Now, what if a 4th or a 5th company comes around and they also want to do this, so we have to put more of these wires on our PG&E poles?
I'm going to ask punt to Brian to answer that question. If they have the authorization under the FCC and CPUC and they can operate as a telephone company, I think the answer is yes. My understanding is that the city can modify a permit, make sure it meets our aesthetic standards, our construction requirements, our permit fees, that type of thing. But I do not think, my understanding is that the council cannot outright deny a permit for a company of this sort. And if I may, if I can go back to the last question, once the fiber optic cable is in, that's a valuable asset. So even in the unlikely scenario that Wave were to go bankrupt or disappear, that's still an asset. I would imagine another company would want to purchase or acquire somehow that asset. So I think the fiber would still remain. I don't think anyone would rip it off of the poles. It's still a valuable asset.
So do we know that we really need this? That's my other question.
Do we need this?
So I would say that my answer to that would be competition is always good for the constituents of the city.
I'm concerned about the visual aspects, and I'll get into that afterwards when I make my comments. But I mean, our power poles are already unattractive, and we're concerned about our visual appeal as a city, and so this is going to add to visual clutter, which is not attractive.
Sounds like an opinion.
Yeah, okay. That's
question.
okay. I'll say it later. Don't worry.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah, is there anybody else? Karen, I can't see you. Did you have any questions?
Can we take this down?
All right. Okay, so we'll take it out to the public. Is there anybody in the public wishing to testify on this item tonight? If so, please step forward. 3-minute limitation on that testimony. Appears Melanie Billig is making her way up. Oh, here we go.
I just had a couple questions. Tasha Witt, resident. Fiber optic is great in that it's hardwired instead of wireless. I would love it for that to be underground, though, and so I have some of the similar concerns mentioned by city council members of weight on the poles. I would want to make sure that the poles are engineered safely with the extra weight, and the extra clutter is obviously a concern for Carmel residents. And I was just doing a Better Business Bureau, a little research on the company, and they all have, I'm sorry, 1-star ratings for customer service. And so that would be a concern of mine, that people can't get a hold of the company when they have customer service problems. I personally would like higher speed internet myself, and I'm trying to get AT&T hooked up, and they can't find my address. So they say it's because of the way they put it into the accounting. So I would want to know if this new service could find our address for billing.
All right, is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Melanie's working her way up. Is there anybody else wishing to speak other than Melanie? All right, we'll take that as a no. Melanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, staff, Melanie Billig. I have some concerns about this project that I would like to share with you and see if we can reach some possible improvements of what we're doing with this project. First of all, I'm very concerned that General Plan P153 talks about promoting undergrounding of utilities. And here we have another company coming into our city wanting to put up more wires. I suggest that, as other people have suggested, that we look at this for undergrounding. This company has plenty of money to do it. There are also other communities that require this type of a project to be undergrounded in their community. So I think you should look at that. Also, the encroachments. The municipal code 12.08 talks about encroachments, and encroachments on public property are to be consistent with the general plan and other city ordinances. This encroachment is not consistent with those general plan or city ordinances. The municipal code 13.32 says that we have for cable system regulations, and this fiber optics is consistent with what the cable systems are supposed to have. There are numerous conditions and requirements listed under the ordinances, et cetera, and both the application and installation, many of these conditions and requirements have not been submitted, nor has an application been seen by the public, and there's not one in our agenda packet. We should know what's going on. Maybe they've been talking since 2017, but I have heard nothing about it. And I don't know anyone who has. And then there's CEQA, and the staff has said there's a categorical exemption. There should not be a categorical exemption under CEQA for this project. Look at section 15303, class 3. It's not applicable to this project. It talks about minor new constructions. Well, these are going to be lines stretched from one end of our community to another. How is that a categorical exemption? It is not. Then under miscellaneous, the proposal makes no mention of a performance bond, a term of the agreement. Is it going to be in perpetuity? Excuse me, I'm hurrying. Or what? I mean, and there's no idea of annual compensation to the city for the privilege of doing this project. And we certainly could use the money.
Melanie, if you could summarize, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, real fast. Like I said, many communities require fiber optics to be buried. And this group can definitely afford doing that, or at least starting this community. If we keep putting off constantly these kind of projects and pushing them on our residents,
Thank you,
they're
Melanie.
unsightly, and
Melanie. Your 3 minutes are up.
possibility for further butchering of our trees irrespective of an arborist.
Thank you for your testimony, Melanie. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak to this item tonight? Anybody in Zoom wishing to speak? I don't see anybody. Nova? Yeah, I don't see anybody else wishing to testify. I'll bring it back to council. Council, questions, comments?
What are the opportunities to micro trench these lines?
You need to get on the mic, sir.
So I would just like to mention to the city that an undergrounding project would be the best thing to do, because if we underground, then the next person undergrounds, and then the next company undergrounds. Your streets are going to be tore up time after time after time, versus collectively having an underground project would be the best way to do it, because then everybody's doing it one time, versus in sharing in the cost, versus having the streets torn up multiple times. And it's micro trenching is something that we've done in other states, and it would be something that we would consider, but not for this particular project, not at this time, unless everybody else is, because it's the cost of doing the underground construction. It does raises the fees.
So basically, you'd be unwilling to do it by yourself, but if you could get a few more on board, you would.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
Can we ask Brian a question?
Sure.
Brian, can you hear us?
Yes.
City
Okay.
Attorney.
City Attorney Brian Perrick. How much of this do we have to do? I mean, are we obligated to go along with this?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Under the Public Utilities Code, we did the research on that, and they're legally entitled to install the facilities. You can impose conditions which have been described in the staff report.
All righty, council, your druthers. Jeff.
I have a question, and maybe this is for Brian too. Let's say the council decided that this project was going to be undergrounded. How do we get the rest of the utilities on the pole? So let's say we just talked about the telecommunications utilities. Well, this is just it. I assume it would take a good bit of time to get the other utilities on the pole. Yeah, it's just, as I say this, it sounds like it's a lot of engineering.
A lot of cost associated too.
Well, you could certainly initiate that conversation. I don't know what other utilities are on these poles that would want to join in that effort. I believe there's also potentially some, I'll ask, I guess, Bob Herrera on this one. Are there funds in any city that the city has access to contribute to the cost of undergrounding?
Thank you, Brian. The only funds we have now are the Rule 20A funds that is going to the council next month to look at a couple of potential utility undergrounding districts. It wasn't intended, it certainly wouldn't go this far. Our potential undergrounding district is one stretch along the Willow Trail at Mission Trails Nature Preserve. The other's in the Del Mar parking lot. So certainly we have a little bit of funds from PG and Rule 20A, but certainly nowhere near the funds we would need to be able to participate in funding this long stretch.
So I guess for me, I'd be willing to support the actions before us, but with the next item, the third item on tonight's actions is consideration of the priorities we've set. Perhaps we should up the priority discussion about the undergrounding of utilities in this area. We've had discussion about this before. I think it necessitates a vote of the public. I think we should ask ourselves, do we want to go ahead and fund that question, put it out to the public, see if they want to assess themselves for the cost of undergrounding? We've had this discussion many times. I think it's not impossible, but I do think we should prioritize it.
Would I be correct in saying if there are more things on our pole, would the undergrounding be shared by more companies? Like would that cost burden lessen the more wires that go on these poles?
The more companies that participate in that joint trench, the cost burden would be broken up between them.
All right, yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm a little, maybe to Bobby's question and to my earlier question, and maybe this is for you, I'm not sure who this is for, but if we decided to, to use this example, if we decided to underground the telecommunication, if we decided that we wanted the telecommunications utilities on Carpenter to be undergrounded along this stretch of this thing, who pays for that? Like how, we've talked a little bit about raising money. Do the telecommunications companies pay to underground? We have to get PG&E to engineer the trench. Like, let's leave PG&E out of it for a second, because that's a different problem, because those are electrical wires. But we have to still get someone to engineer the trench under the road, and then we have to dig the trench, and the only thing the telecommunications companies are required is to move their wires into the trench. So we have to provide everything except the physical movement of the wires. Is that how this would work?
Yes, sir.
So, okay.
So it wouldn't help us at all if there were 50 companies on those poles. It wouldn't help us at all because we still got a trench.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. I mean, I'm not sure that the 50 utilities thing is. I mean, if the trench is still our responsibility, like every utility is going to have to pay their own fair share to get their wires into the trench and hooked up to the homes, but we have to provide the hookups in the trench.
Can we rent that space?
Could we rent it? The trench space?
Well, it's ours.
It's ours.
We own it, and we get franchise fees. Potentially. I mean, I think the higher hurdle is again getting the power in the trench, so that our residents don't experience power losses and wildfire safety issues. So it's a big undertaking. So again, you'll hear about a little piece of it next month that we're paying for through our assessment fees that our PG&E already has.
Can you look into what we could charge for rent for these wires?
We can look into that.
Not that I'm interested in clearing up of additional agendas, but this is not a time-sensitive item, I don't think, is it, Bob? Could we continue this item with direction that you've heard tonight?
It's completely okay to continue the item to next month if that's your.
Council members?
Yeah, I'd support that.
I wanted to say something, please.
Certainly, Karen.
Yeah, I know most of us who drive around town are pretty dismayed by all of the communication lines that are attached to trees. And then when the tree dies, we end up with telephone poles with communication lines attached to them, and they don't seem to come down. And it's unsightly, and I would hope that a project like this, there would be absolutely no attachment of anything to trees along those routes, and that we would in the future somehow lean on those communication companies to get their lines off of the trees so that we can remove a lot of those totem poles that we have left. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. All right, guys, what do you want to do? Continue. 2 months? Okay, Bob, does that give you enough time to answer the questions that you've heard tonight?
I have a couple of answers to the questions, and some will need to.
The mayor's asking if 2 months is enough time for you to answer the questions. To continuing this for 2 months.
North-south.
If you want to, sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So I think a motion to continue for 2 months would be good order.
I would second that.
Okay. All right, Nova, I've made a motion. Jeff seconded. Do we have
Yes.
roll call?
Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Jeremoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, next item is receive an after-action report on Car Week 2023 and provide direction to staff if possible. Chip, I mean, do you want to tee this up?
Yeah, Ashley's going to present, but there's a lot of people here to potentially talk about this, or ideally, because we really need the community input. Ashley will talk about the survey that we had, and as you've heard me say, it was a pretty rough car week this year. I mean, the curated events were very well organized and facilitated and safe. It was really the after-hours activity that really kind of worried us, and and quite frankly, put our residents, guests, and staff members, including the police department, obviously, in some form of danger. So Ashley's going to run through, and we do want some policy direction from you at the end of this. So,
Ashley,
thank you.
Floor is yours.
Sebastian, can you give her the presentation, please?
Thanks.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, I'm here this evening to give you a debrief on how Car Week went this year. This will be comprehensive, so it will include the events that were permitted through my office in the Community Activities Department, parking stall permits, as well as some of the after actions or after hours issues that occurred and how those were mitigated from what we learned last year and in previous years. So I'm going to start with events. There were 4 events permitted in Carmel-by-the-Sea this year. Tuesday, we had Acura in the Park. They were used to be a part of the Concours on the Avenue event that happened every Tuesday for years. Wednesday, we had a new event come to town, and that was the Concours for a Cause, and it featured different kinds of electric vehicles, but also vehicles that had also participated and were past winners of Concours on the Avenue as a legacy of that event. Thursday was the Prancing Ponies event. And then we also had another small event on Thursday as well, and that was the Ferrari Owners Club, and they did a concours Carmel. Overall for our events, they ran smoothly. There were no major issues breaking down. One of the things after, even more coordination with the police department, the VIPs, Public Works, because we all work to make sure that signage, delineators are up in the correct place, is to standardize the times when events set up and when they break down, so that in the evenings, especially later in the week, when the Public Works crews and police department are starting to put in traffic calming measures, there's a minimal amount of overlap with events breaking down to reduce that congestion. And I'm going to just make a comment here with with these smaller events. These were the permits that came to us. I know there's been talk about bringing back a large-scale event, Concours on the Avenue. I've been talking to groups for the last 2 years, since Concours on the Avenue hasn't been happening, about bringing back that type of event. And I understand this. I actually just talked to the Rotary Club last week, and we did talk about Car Week. Concours on the Avenue and that scale of event is challenging, especially for a new event organizer. It's understanding the logistics and having the relationships within the car community to start to build that type of event. My hope is that either one of the events that we currently have or a new event organizer will step forward with that vision in mind to grow something into a CODA-like event. Because for those of us who have been here and know, Concours on the Avenue did not start out at the size it was. It grew. They refined that event over years and years and years that it occurred. So I do hear the community on that. I saw this in the survey. I will continue to work with our current event organizers and with anybody who wants to talk to me about our permitting application and the types of things they need to think about. I've been doing events now for myself for 10 years for the city events. I could not put on a scale of a CODA-like event. It really is truly just that event alone, a full-time job, and the Friedmans would have told you that as well. The Community Activities Department also issues parking stall permits. We have, as part of our fee schedule, and this was devised in the early 2000s to be able to issue parking stall permits specifically during Car Week and during the holiday times to allow business owners to be able to provide valet services to their customers. As we all know, parking is at a premium during Car Week. This has morphed a little bit over the years, and business owners are renting the stalls during Car Week to park, vehicles of note, fancy vehicles out inside their businesses to bring attention to that business, which is, fair enough. They do pay for those parking stalls, but I have been especially starting in 2019, and I think that was the first year we really saw the exotics come into town and cause problems, paying attention to whether this practice is contributing to some of the other chaos that's happening around town. So I have some proposed changes to our parking stall administration because I was walking the streets every day, and Lee Whitney was honored earlier, which was wonderful, and all of our VIPs, they were in and out of my office, and the park branch is kind of a home base, to kind of mitigate some of those things. And what I hope is make a balance with what the business owners are trying to do, but also, again, for especially parking stalls rented on the corners by businesses, that really contributed to people standing in the street and taking photos. So the things I would propose to change to that practice would be to require that any vehicles be parked in those stalls all day, unless they really truly are being used for valet services, because it seemed like there was a lot of moving around that was contributing to the chaos in some of these areas. The businesses would need to be responsible for traffic control and any extra security if they know they're going to have, a really high-end car that's going to draw attention there. That is absolutely critical in a time where our police department, is all hands on deck and needs to be able to respond to dangerous situations when they're needed, but the businesses need to pitch in as well. And then I would also propose no rental of the green zone spaces on the corners of each block to keep people out of, drifting into larger intersections, which is a problem. We want to keep our pedestrians and onlookers as safe as we can. And I'm just going to keep going through this. The chief is here. He and I worked very closely on this presentation and staff report, but just for continuity's sake, I'm going to keep running through things. So, as we all know, the exotics and fuel run groups are continuing to cause issues for the village in the evenings, and not just us, the entire peninsula. And so over the last few years, the police department and the public works department have worked to improve traffic calming measures on Ocean Avenue. So the things that would happen, like people trying to do donuts in the middle of that San Carlos and Ocean intersection, because it's a big intersection and they've got this, they've been paid to show off this car and display it on social media. They can't do those things anymore. We're no longer a fun place to come and pull that kind of stunt because you can't do it. So I know it's not perfect because it's for residents and maybe someone that just wants to eat at a restaurant. It can be a little confusing, but it certainly did stop that kind of activity on Ocean Avenue. The police are going to continue, as they've done the last few years, monitor social media. That's critical for knowing when groups are going to show up, and communicate with other agencies about that to let people know, hey, these guys are headed your way. And then also provide the mutual aid, which is the STOP program, where there are different checkpoints that are set up with different police departments working together to halt vehicles, make sure there's no drunk drivers and that kind of thing, so to collaborate on those. In addition, the police department will continue its no tolerance approach to dangerous driving. You will get a ticket. We're not letting anybody off. And that's, I think, really critical, again, so that visitors understand the expectations for their behavior here when they're in our village for Car Week. And then this year we also experimented with deploying temporary speed bumps. That worked well. They got destroyed because so many cars went over them. So I think additional speed bumps and potentially additional locations in the city will be explored for next year. As mentioned, there was a survey that was done. It was comparable with the survey results seen from last year. Our respondents are either, 2/3 of it are okay with it or they love Car Week. And that's a mix of residents and visitors. And then the other third just hate it. It's the worst week ever, and it's for various reasons. They don't like the noise, the traffic, all of that. So about half of our respondents were residents, others were visitors, others were business owners. So we had a pretty good mix of respondents. A lot of the comments, and the survey results were attached as part of your agenda packet as well. Many of these comments were about larger peninsula issues, not germane necessarily just to the village. So traffic and noise. I think everybody by the end time Car Week ends has not been sleeping well all week and feels a little zombie because it's a noisy time. And then of course, getting to work takes twice, sometimes 3 times as long, depending on the event day. So it's a good revenue for our peninsula, but also it's challenging for those of us who live here. There were also reports of issues with a private event that occurred at the Sunset Center. Chip, the chief, and I met with Sunset Center staff to talk about how those issues arose and how we can support them as they do event planning for next year for Car Week, so that they are involved. And I understand, after speaking with them, the challenges they had with the event organizer, and we have some good strategies in place to make sure that the event organizer really understands what you need to do to be in our village and be a respectful event haver person, because it is a challenge. And we want whoever's having the event to put on an event that is respectful of the residents and isn't out of control, especially late at night when the police are dealing with the fuel run issues. And then, as I touched on before, there was the desire for the return of a Concours-like event or Tour d'Elegance event, and I'm hoping that those things will come back to us in the future. That will never go away, and I'm really hoping that something, comes forward, somebody comes forward that has that skill set to produce an event of that caliber and that scale. So planning for 2024, we're looking at continuing always to refine our traffic calming measures, work with event organizers to improve the events, make sure they're very car focused. That's what people want to see when they come to Car Week. They want cars. We'll continue to work with our other safety agencies and enforce that no tolerance policy. We can always, I think, improve and look at our mutual aid response planning with other agencies, and also improve our signage and communications. I worked with the Visit Carmel to do a brochure earlier this year about what events we were having. I'd like to get that out even earlier, and I think we could have some signs up entering into the village about some of the expectations, slow down, that type of thing that we can look at employing for next year's Car Week. And I included in my staff report, I know that, again, Car Week can be a lot for people, but unless there's a bigger sea change of mindset, I think, peninsula-wide, especially amongst our leaders, Board of Supervisors, where we start talking about limiting the number of events jointly, we're still going to see some of these problems with traffic and noise. And I'm happy to answer any questions, as is the chief.
Thank you, Ashley. Are there any questions by council members? Bobby?
Ashley, are you working with some of the other peninsula towns, like concern with some of these concerns on how we can kind of parry off each other?
So there is a group of people like myself who process permit applications, but unless there's some sort of policy in place that governs how many events that we can have during the week jointly, like we can limit them now. We have in the past where we said no more than 2 events, and then we were at 3, and now we're kind of playing around with these smaller events. We could do that interjurisdictionally, but from what I've seen from those meetings, it really needs to come from a group like the mayor's group that gets together or something like that, where you can give us direction, because we can talk about it, but if it's not something that leadership is in agreement about, that it's not going to go anywhere, in my opinion.
Do you want to show the last slide?
Yeah.
Oh, recommendations. I have those. Thank you, Chip. So, in addition to continuing to use what we learned from our after action, we've been talking about increasing fines for certain violations during Car Week, potentially closing Ocean Avenue during the evening hours to mitigate that street takeover block party mentality and just create a safe, friendly walking environment. And then, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, implementing some of those modifications for parking stall rentals. And that's really the end.
Thank you, Ashley. Any other questions? Alessandra?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I have a question for the chief, and I don't mean to put you on the spot on this because I've not asked you this ahead of time, but could you give us an idea of the overtime that is involved and what impact this has on the whole police force?
Absolutely.
You are prepared.
I'm glad you asked, because I actually was pulling that up to refresh my memory.
Thanks.
So, throughout the entire week, Ashley did a wonderful job presenting this, and I think she really hit a lot of key points that we talked about here. Is our day events are really, really ran smoothly. We have enough staffing, we have the capacity to operate with what we're doing now. It's the nighttime events that becomes an issue, because every city wants to have an event, and the larger social media grows, the more events come to our city, the more vehicles, the more people. And when all these events are over in all the other cities, everybody wants to come to Carmel. So this is where our emergency services get taxed. They get pushed right to the brink, because we're getting so many more vehicles, exotics, that are coming from these other events and transcending on our city in the nighttime hours, which you could turn it into an unsanctioned event. And so we only have so many people to handle this. Even with outside agencies coming in and assisting us, you just get thousands and thousands of vehicles. And so what I can tell you is we had over 350,000 visitors for the week.
Carmel or the county?
Carmel. Just from the cars. So we had an average of about 18,000 cars that came in throughout the city. If you take 3 people per car, you're getting a lot of people coming through town, right?
What's a normal number?
A normal number, about 6,000 to 7,000. So it's pretty inflated. And our average, so dispatch hours, we had 40 hours of additional overtime, just to man the phones, to handle the calls for service. Just the sheer number of calls coming in was extraordinary. So our patrol hours, we had 270 hours of overtime. Our VIP total hours were 45. And during that time, we had a total of 212 calls for service, which on average we could get between 15 and 30 a day. So we got up to 212. We had a total of 141 traffic stops. We issued 74 citations. We had 67 warnings. We arrested 2 people. We had 2 DUIs. And then we had reckless vehicle calls for service. We had over 20, which in years past was probably double that. So the mitigation efforts that we did with the traffic calming measures and the speed bumps and slowing vehicles down so that they couldn't get out of first gear, they could still show off their cars, but slowing them down to the fact that they can't do their shenanigans was very beneficial for us. But it took our entire staff to do it. So when you think about that and all the unsanctioned events that come here at night, we're going to have to come up with a plan to enforce that. That's really what it comes down to. The daytime events are fine. It's the nighttime events we're not big enough to handle the amount that's coming in.
Could I just follow up on that? And thank you so much for your thorough explanation. Would it help if each business got private security and hired their own security to help control things in that specific area that they're in?
It may help, but it may add to the problem.
Hello, bears.
I'm sorry.
Hello, bears. They had quite an event going on for quite a while.
If let's say a business, as you say, LeBears, has multi-million-dollar cars in front of it, it's going to draw a crowd. There is no question. So if they had staffing to mitigate the crowds that come into the street, that would be good during the day. Nighttime events, it would probably impact us more, because then we're going to have to start to deal with security on whole different levels, because we're shutting down streets. We're feeling what the crowd is doing, and then we're leapfrogging them, shutting down streets so that everything that's about to happen stops completely. And then the crowds go away, and then we open streets back up. So we have a method to the madness that what we're doing. But I mean, it would help, I think, for if they're going to have a lot of exotic vehicles in front of their businesses, absolutely. Get some staffing to help control the crowds. I would be all for that.
But then they would feel entitled to having an event.
An unsanctioned event, correct.
Right.
So it's
kind of a catch-22, because if they hire 15 security guards, then they feel entitled to, well, we have an unsanctioned event.
Agreed.
Jeff, do you have questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions. What time was the auberge stuff going on?
Daytime.
So that was a daytime
right in the
event.
afternoon, yeah.
Was the Sunset Center event also during the day?
No, that was a nighttime event. That was, we weren't made aware of that event, so we didn't.
What time was the event, do you know? Just
I think it went to 11. It went to 11.
Ms. Bowman's here, so we can.
Yeah, I don't want to put her on the spot. I see you there. I don't want to put you on the spot.
And we discussed that with her, and we came up with ways to mitigate that in the future.
Okay. How many other, like, I guess these two questions are sort of related. How many other than the Sunset Center event and maybe this auberge event, how many other events were there in town other than the 4 that you listed that were sort of city-sponsored events? Were there others
Well, I think
that haven't come up?
To answer your question, yes. I don't think there was business events, but there were car clubs. So you get a car club that brings in 100 cars, and we had 4 different clubs that came in.
So like the Porsche Club brings in 100 people to have dinner at Casanova or something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. And there was over 100 cars that came into the barnyard on a Saturday morning. Nobody knew about, but the car club came there, which just brought more people, more cars.
And then, Ashley, you talked a little bit about, and thank you for all the work, for sure. You talked a little bit about parking stall rentals. Like, how many parking stall days did we rent? And were they in like groups of like, somebody would rent 1 or 2 parking spots, or do we have people that rent more than 2 parking spots, or?
Typically, it's 2 or 3 parking stalls per business.
Like for a day
have
or
asked
a week, or?
Usually it's a couple days during the week. So they'll have 2 or 3 days a week, and I have a whole spreadsheet and chart listing out, everybody who rented a parking stall which day, because we have to keep track of that for marking the stalls for no parking on those days. So it can get a little complicated.
And then were there any that were more than 2 or 3 stalls?
Yes, there were. So on Friday, it was Friday. Muse Gallery started out with renting, a couple of stalls, and then
like in past years, you mean?
Yeah, they've usually rented, 1 or 2 right there by the gallery. But they ended up just kind of having an impromptu event like we're talking about, where they rented both sides of Ocean Avenue. I didn't have a mechanism to preclude them from doing that, but we talked about like, oh, this is kind of a pop-up event, different when Jeff is speaking about for these fuel run groups that just kind of descend on you without warning. And we didn't have any problems with them. They were great, super easy to work with, and they have been over the years. But it is something that I want to closely monitor. And we do have a policy C-1601, that governs special events. That I have things that need to be updated on that, but I would like to take that and make that germane to Car Week to help with some of these types of things.
So they rented like 6 spots on each side of Ocean Avenue between Monteverde and Lincoln?
Yes.
So 12 spots or whatever that
Yeah,
number is.
however many was, yeah.
Okay. And then I have a question, and I'm not sure, maybe this is for the chief or for the lawyer. Someone mentioned that we have in the past, but maybe not this year, given out citations for noise, like excessive noise produced by cars, and that for some reason this year we didn't, or we're not allowed to, or we don't have the rules in place or whatever. So I guess my question is, do we give out noise citations? Like a couple people have asked me about this. And
So yes, we can. We didn't do very many this year. I think we only did maybe two or 3. It wasn't very many. It's hard to figure out when a vehicle. So let's take a Lamborghini for example. It's not sold in California, so it's not to California specs, and it comes in for the event and it's just parked and revving the engine. We really have no recourse for that. So our Class D noise doesn't stand up to it.
So we
our Class C noise. So, and the laws for revving an engine really don't apply.
Our laws or the state laws?
Our laws, our municipal codes really don't apply to just a vehicle sitting in the commercial district revving an engine. So it kind of handcuffs us there.
But
Chief, so the complaints that I've heard are from noise, like street noise traffic, like people revving their engines or using their Jake brakes or whatever it is headed down Ocean Avenue, for example, past your house. So
most of those vehicles come equipped with a regular muffler, and then they have a button that will take that muffler and open it. So it makes it as a straight pipe. And there's a button inside the car that does these things. So that's why when you hear cars coming down the hill and there's a lot of back pressure, or you can really hear them start opening up that muffler. But you can also just hit a button and turn it right off. And when you're just in the downtown area, if you're not over 95 decibels, then you're legal.
So that car that's riding down Ocean Avenue and they've switched off their muffler, is that illegal according to our code, or is that okay according?
That would be illegal to
finding them is one thing.
Yes.
Finding them is one thing,
but for
it's
our
illegal.
code, yeah, we don't have
cited.
recourse.
What?
Under our code, I don't believe we have recourse.
So we don't have recourse in that situation either.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, didn't we talked about this before, about the modified mufflers? Like, we can detect a modified muffler, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the CHP does have the certain tool that can measure muffler decibel, right?
They do. They have a decibel reader that they can put behind the muffler, but at idle, almost all these cars are gonna pass that test. And I personally don't know how you would get behind a vehicle and monitor the noise, and it's loud, you can hear it, so that you can write the citation on your own personal knowledge of it and go to court and try to argue it that way. But any car that's just parked, and you can come up behind the exhaust with a decibel reader, and if it's under 95 decibels, which 99% of these cars are at idle, then it passes.
Is there a rule that if it's at idle, it has to be under 60 decibels or something like that? I mean, what would it take to buy one of these machines?
That's my question. Would you like one?
Sure.
I've seen Monterey use it pretty effectively.
Yeah. I could look into what it would cost, and
I think it would
come
be
back to
a
you with
wise
what the
investment
cost would be.
to look at.
But I think what he said earlier was that even if you had the machine, we still can't issue the citation because our code isn't up to date.
Yeah, but there's a California state.
If we change the municipal code to focus solely on vehicles that were parked, because a lot of these cars will park and they'll just rev. And so if we had let's call it a Class D or a Class C noise violation that was specific to engine revving, I think we've solved that problem.
Okay, well, that's good. Brian Pierrick, I hope you're taking note of this. Counselor, good. All right, any other questions? Chief, I'd just like to say, honestly, one of the things that I was impressed with was their stop program. When the word got out on the street, Ginny and I were walking around waiting to see what would cause the crowd to disperse. What got them to disperse was when they knew they weren't coming. Mm-hmm. We'd hear them say, okay, they're not coming, because it was the monitoring of social media. It was the stop program that made them not come. So what could you do to be more aggressive in that area? Because that seems to be the best tool for keeping them out of here.
Yeah, so the stop program, it is a couple officers from each agency on the peninsula, and they all get together and send on a city, or they follow where the groups will go and try to mitigate any of the sideshows, the speeding, and so they're extremely effective. A great tool for us. It's just we asked for them, Monterey asked for them, Seaside, everybody wants them. So, and there's only a handful of them, which makes it a little tough, but we can definitely.
What about monitoring social media? Is you're monitoring the social media that everybody's watching? What could you do more there to be more effective? I mean, it was really impressive when I was walking around, and all of a sudden they'd say, "They're not coming. They're not coming." They knew they weren't coming. They'd get up and leave. That's what made the crowd disperse.
Yeah. Agreed.
Anything you'd like to do more?
If I'm understanding your question is how are we monitoring?
No, how much more could you do to monitor it?
How much more would we do?
What would you
so
make
what
more,
we do
more
now,
effective?
I don't think you guys know is what we do now is all the supervisors from each agency, we're in a text thread. So we're talking to each other, telling each other who's in what city and where and what they're doing. So if a specific car club is leaving a city, we'll get a message saying, hey, they're coming over here, they're going there, and then the stop program will will follow right behind. Or CHP will follow, or they'll be waiting on the highway to make sure that everything is in accordance. So we're monitoring them probably more than they're monitoring us.
Right. Karen, you've got your hand up.
Yes. Is there any planning that takes place regionally for what we would do in the case of an emergency? We do live in earthquake country. We do have fires at the various times a year. I feel a little uncomfortable not knowing if there's anything that takes place before CAR 2 weeks to talk about the coordination for something like that. And then secondly, if our Muni code is lacking in things that help you, can you, as a police department, put your heads together and come up with all the situations where we need to beef up the Muni code? So I've asked you 2 questions.
Yes and yes. So, yes, we can put our heads together and beef up the Muni code. That I don't think that's an issue at all. That would be probably the simpler of the 2. The first question, refresh my memory on exactly what you were asking.
What would happen in our peninsula if there were an emergency situation with hundreds of thousands of people here that don't know where they are, don't know their address, don't know what they're doing? How do you work with the entire peninsula to have some sort of a game plan?
So we have multiple meetings starting 2 months out, I believe, from CAR Week, with every agency on the peninsula and with Office of Emergency Services. And so we will meet collectively, and we'll start talking about, okay, Carmel's going to have these events, Monterey's having these events, how many people is this going to draw, what is Pebble Beach having, and what are they offering? And then we start talking about, if a fire happens in this area, how are we going to get emergency personnel from one side of the peninsula to the other? How are we going to get emergency personnel to the hospital? You know, these are all things. Where are we going to land helicopters? These are all things that are discussed and talked about. So, rest assured, we are doing that in the meetings.
Thank you.
Brian, you have your hand up, Counselor.
I do, Mayor. From what I've heard, it's the direction of council to consider potential amendments to the city's municipal code. And if that is your direction, I'd be glad to work with the chief and his staff, as well as other city staff, to come back to the council with some recommendations.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. All right. Is there any other questions about council before I open it up to the public? I don't see anybody. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak this item tonight? Do come forward.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. I'm David O'Neill, and tonight I am not speaking on behalf of the VIPs, so I'll take that off. Maybe that'll help. I'm speaking on behalf of the CRA board. We really wanted to say that we're so delighted at how much improvement there was this year and how things were handled. Some of our members were upset about some of the traffic and the safety confusion and noise that you've all been discussing so well. And we're wondering perhaps if maybe some of the two-way intersections around the area that's affected could have temporary stop signs to help with the traffic. I can't say, putting back on my VIPS hat, trying to help over there with Auberge, and that's a two-way intersection. That was making it much more confusing. The other thing is the speed bumps. If it could be increased, that would be great. Some of the suggestions were on San Carlos, Santa Lucia, Carpenter, and Ocean. And thank you so much. We love the event.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak?
Good afternoon, Mayor Potter, members of the council, members of the city staff. My name is Cindy Lloyd. There's one part of the village that doesn't seem to get any attention in terms of protection during Car Week, and that's the medians, and specifically the Memorial Arch at San Carlos and Ocean. There are people sitting in, trampling,
putting up their chairs on the apron of the arch. And we all know that that's hand-hewn sandstone that is very fragile, and the arch has been completely restored, and it is getting overused by so many people. I don't know any way that it could be mitigated and protected other than putting a fence around it, because little white ropes don't seem to do it. And I did talk to some of the, particularly they were young men, and they were very polite when I explained what it was, and they got off, but I don't believe they would stay off very long once I drove away. And also, there is no cognizance of the fact that the medians are landscaped. And so people walk on the landscaping, and there isn't any regard for Ocean Avenue medians, and that's just my plea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Is there anybody else?
Beth Bowman, Executive Director for the Sunset Cultural Center. We appreciate being included in the Car Week conversation. And while we rely on the revenue of our Car Week rentals, it's our goal to do so as good neighbors. So we will continue to collaborate with our city partners and with the Carmel Police Department for a successful Car Week for all. Thank you.
Thank you, much appreciated.
And the event was supposed to end by 11. That was our curfew given, and we know it went a little longer.
Thank you.
But it won't next year.
Next speaker.
Members of the council, Mayor, my name is Mike Brown, and thank you, Cindy, for bringing up a very important point, and that is the World War I Memorial. During events like Car Week, people climb on it to get better pictures, walk through the garden, and I, as an individual, a couple of times have stopped, walked over and asked them to please be sensitive to this memorial. And one gentleman, I won't even repeat here, his response to what he thought of my comment. So if either through the volunteer program or with the police department, you could have an officer or somebody down there with a badge, has a little more authority, and gets across to the point that this is a memorial and please respect it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Good evening, Mayor Potter and members of council. I just wanted to add my support to Mike Brown and Cindy Lloyd's remarks about the World War I Memorial. It did undergo a restoration. It is still very delicate on the arch itself. Many of the stones are still original to the very early 1920s and will eventually need to be replaced in the not too distant future. So we should absolutely take additional measures to protect the memorial. And friendly reminder, council a few years ago did pass some kind of I don't know if it was strictly speaking a resolution or an ordinance, but there was language adopted by the municipality committing itself to protecting the memorial during major events on Ocean Avenue. It may be time to take a look at that again and just redouble our efforts to protect this amazing resource. Thank you.
Well, we might know who you are. Could we get your name for the record?
Ian Martin.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it. Next speaker. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in the room? I don't see anybody. Is there anybody out in Zoom land wishing to speak tonight? I don't see anybody. All right. We'll bring it back to council for direction. Council, there's 6 items that the staff is looking for direction on right away. And I think that we'll probably concur with these. Continuing to refine traffic calming measures, continue to work with event organizers, continue to work with regional and state law enforcement agencies, continue to enforce a no tolerance approach, and then also continue to work with the Peninsula L law enforcement partners and continuing to improve signage and messaging through press, media, and social media. I think those are good. The other ones they're looking for is increasing fines for certain violations of the municipal code during Car Week, completely closing Ocean Avenue, and implementing the aforementioned modifications to rental parking spaces. I don't have a problem with any of those. I do think one of the things that I heard concurrence on was that we should go back and amend the ordinance as far as noise goes. I think that will help with enforcement, and also we go ahead and prioritize a purchase for a monitoring device for the sheriff, for the police department. Anybody else?
Well, if I could ask staff for 2 things, I would say please find out how much the noise, the decibel reader would be. The other is, I think those good points were brought up about the World War I Memorial. Mm-hmm. And Bob, maybe you could find out how much it would cost to get a temporary fence around that, because I think that would be pretty simple to do. And
yes, so
And I was remiss in not including this in my staff report. I also observed the same bad behavior on the medians and scolded people for it. We do have some very solid event fencing already. You'll see us use it for the pumpkin roll. That would be ideal to put around the World War I Memorial Arch. And I think some research needs to be done about something to rent to cover the other medians, because it is tricky, and it would just be for this week. So we're on it.
Stay there, Ashley. One last question for
Yes.
you. Excuse me. I did hear from some business owners in town that they were a little discouraged by having barricades go up so early when there wasn't a problem in the daytime, as we've realized. Is it possible to get the barriers up a little later, like 7 o'clock at night or something like that?
I think by the time you get around to 7 o'clock at night, the problems have already started. So, and it's that looking at what time the other events end. So like our events end at 3 p.m. and I want people breaking down around that time. So later in the afternoon, and that's when people are going to start thinking about where they're going for dinner and what's happening. I think the sweet spot's 4, but the chief and I will definitely add that to our discussions as we start planning early in the year for these things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a few. I would go further than, I guess, what the mayor has suggested. I appreciate the comments on the World War I Memorial. That's certainly important. It seems like that's covered. I'm looking at the slide of the parking stall permits that you put up, and you asked for some guidance, and I think we should modify the rules related to the parking stall permits. You have 3 proposals. Vehicles placed in the parking stall shall remain in that day in the stall for the day unless they're for valet services. So no moving in and out of the vehicles, out of the stalls. 2, businesses responsible for traffic control and security as needed. And 3, no rental of the green zone spaces. Were people renting the green zone spaces? Okay, so I agree with the no rental of the green zone spaces, and I would certainly like to see that. Vehicles placed in the rented parking stalls remain in that stall for the day unless valet services. So that sounds like a good idea. I'm not 100% sold, but I think to me it sounds like something we should try. Maybe it'll cut down on the sort of illegal, not illegal, sort of the illicit car shows that seem to go on. I assume that that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, with the cars moving in and out all
Where we
day.
had cars.
Yeah, I mean, if you stood outside of the Harrison Library and watched the corner there with our wonderful neighbors, Fortains, it was.
So you either have like one car all day or no cars.
Exactly.
No cars. So I think that sounds like a good idea.
And again, we can try it out. I'm not sure how the business owners will feel about it, but it will definitely, I think, help mitigate some of that, and it's worth a test.
So I would be in favor of the rule modifications for that. I would also be in favor of rule modifications that limited the number of parking spots. Like, I don't think, I know Simon is a good guy, and I'm sure that his event was perfectly respectable. His sort of illicit event was sort of perfectly respectable, but I don't think we should have businesses on Ocean renting out 12 parking spots on Ocean for the day. Like, I don't think that's not copacetic. And I wonder if we should have a limit on the number of parking spots on each block that are rented. So I don't know, you start getting into whoever gets there first gets the 2 parking spots, but definitely, and just to use Simon as an example, I would think that his business should be limited to 2 parking spots.
I would say a limit of 2 or 3 per business. And the thing with the parking stall permits also is that, it's been mostly the same businesses year over year renting these stalls. And they're, easy enough to work with. And so we'll test these things out. Because some of the cars are really cool. I don't want to prevent that. But we do want to mitigate any danger that comes with cars going in and out and onlookers standing in the middle of the street type of thing.
I think that's all kind of a problem. And then your middle item is businesses responsible for traffic control and security. And, back to what the chief said before about sort of businesses and private security and all that stuff. And that notion of businesses having policemen downtown during these sort of volatile events makes me really nervous. And I don't wonder, and I would, certainly be open to input, whether we should increase our parking stall permit fee so that we can supply police protection, city-defined police protection, however, assuming we can get it,
Well,
some other jurisdiction to monitor these things, or?
It may be that those other modifications to the parking stall rental rules will negate the need for security, and maybe that's something that we can revisit for next year. We were okay for this year with VIPS monitoring, with me monitoring, the chief keeping an eye on things during the day. So I think that those other efforts are enough, and we can revisit that next year if it really continues to be a problem.
So I do think we should make the modifications to those modifications I talked about, the green zones and the modification that you suggested for the parking spot. So I think that those are very worthwhile, and I would be in favor of seeing that done. And then, the events, I think unfortunately the Sunset Center event has sort of caused a bit of a firestorm, and I'm not sure that at the Sunset Center or anywhere whether we should be having events at night. Like I don't know, Ms. Bowman, if the event ends at 9, I'm not sure that that's good enough for me. I'm not sure that I think that keeps, their residences all around. That, just to call them out as an example, that parking lot is surrounded by residences. And St. Carlos is a really busy street, and I don't think there should be an event there at night, which is hard to police, and then everybody's had a little bit to drink, and the fuel run, the exotics are coming in, and it seems like a magnet for badness, and I don't wonder if we talked about modifying the municipal code for noise, and I don't wonder if we should modify the municipal code for events like that at night.
I mean, that is potentially a modification that could come with special event policy C-1601, which I will be bringing back for.
But to use Beth as sorry.
So that's a private event.
As an example, that's a private event. And
right.
Our event guidelines
are open to the public.
Don't have control over what the Sunset Center decides to do with their facility, but our municipal code would.
But this would be decided by a council, not just what Jeff's saying right now, right?
This is all just under general direction. We're coming back.
Yes.
Right. So
what I'm asking for your input in is, both on the parking spot modifications, and also whether the council is interested in some sort of ordinance modifications to prohibit these nighttime events. I don't think that they're particularly good for the city, and I would like to see something like that happen.
Yeah, and I think for our village, the only nighttime type of event that we have is Sunset Center. Last year, or what happened this year is unfortunate. They have hosted Zinger previous years and not had any problems, and I think with the support of the chief and I, we can get them back there where it's not causing problems, because again, it is a source of revenue for the Sunset Center. They are a nonprofit.
That's what I would be looking for, is how are they going to fix it, not to stop it.
Right. I would give them another year of hammering on them, and we can talk about an earlier party end time, if that would be, just for this Sunset Week. We don't typically have large events. They don't have problems. I mean, they have their concerts and things like that going on during the year, and they're generally very good neighbors, and I would like the opportunity to work with them on that for this coming year.
Good. Any other questions or comments? Under direction. Karen, direction.
Yeah, I attended a car party, I think it was the Friday night. It could have been Saturday night, but there was also a very loud party going on at the Women's Club. So you might check into if that was also the same night as the Sunset Center, because I was surprised how loud that event was. They had a live band, and it was quite raucous. They were having a great time. I have always had concerns about the median. I used to volunteer at the Concord, the rally on Thursday, and I actually had to resign because the rudeness of people when you asked them to not trample or not be on the median, they did not care. They said terrible things to the volunteers. They ignored you. And I don't know what the answer is, but we're going to redo all these medians, and I just hate to see them destroyed every year. And the same way with the World War I arch. This is very important that we do something to protect those areas. I think the vast majority of complaints come from noise and speed. And I know when these exotics leave town, it did help tremendously that they couldn't just totally race up Ocean Avenue, but they take off out San Carlos and Junipero, and then they go past the Mission and often do some little road showing down there. So the noise travels throughout the peninsula. And it's very distressing to think that we can't do much about noise. So I would like to see something maybe about rewriting our ordinances on that. But I also want to note that we have people in town that own some of these very loud cars, and they make a lot of noise on a regular basis, not just during our week. So I think for some reason during the pandemic, a lot of people forgot their manners. They forget to stop at stop signs. They forget to not make turns in the middle of the street. There's a lot of behavior that has changed, I think, over the last several years. And there just seems to be a little bit of reticence to follow the rules. But noise is certainly a big one. The other thing I might mention, and I don't know how many retail stores actually participated in the survey, but I hear from a lot of people, unless it's a specialty store that is something that car people like, that our retail often suffers that week because people just don't want to come down into the mess. So I don't know whether there's a better way to actually reach out to the retail stores. I think that would be valuable. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So I suspect you've been given adequate direction to go explore. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to take a bio break now, 10-minute bio break. We'll be back at about, well, let's say 6:25. No, 6:35. Okay. And Ashley, good job as always. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ashley.
are you doing, Bobby?
Good. You got a great shows here.
Oh my gosh. Yes, fantastic. It's an awesome season.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Did you hear I went to Carmel, Indiana?
No.
So
Wait, what happened?
I was driving. I was in Kentucky and I was driving home, and I was like, I gotta drive to Carmel, Indiana. Check this
Yeah,
place
my
out.
sister city. Yeah.
So I go into Carmel, Indiana. I go into the city hall, and some nice people are working and sitting, and I said, I'm asking two questions. I'm a visitor here. Is Clint Eastwood still the mayor, and where's the beach?
Oh my God, hilarious! I love
And
it.
so they start laughing.
Yeah.
And so
That's so funny.
Thank you.
That's so funny.
And so then I go, and they come out, everybody comes out, and they want to take me on a tour of the city.
Yeah.
Beautiful city. And so then I meet the mayor, and he's over there, and he goes, are you going to stay here tonight? And I said, well, I wasn't planning up, but I think I will. And he goes, oh, he gets me a great room at a really good rate. So that was great. Hey, George. So that was really nice. Then thank you very much. He goes, I said, oh, tonight, Ben Harper's
Very glad
right?
Yeah.
And he goes, do you want to go? And I said, yeah.
Oh my God, I love it.
He calls up the person that's in charge like you.
Yeah.
Off schedule already. Let's move on to the next item, which is the review of the priorities that we set at the August 30th meeting. I'd like to get staff to run through those quickly, and then we can go ahead and put it out to public, see what they think, and we'll bring it back to council for direction.
I just need help showing my presentation on the council screen. Thank you.
So we'll run through these now, and then we'll go ahead and get, if the council has any questions, we'll get to questions, but we'll go to the public first after that.
The Mayor, Council, the purpose of this recap is to provide staff with direction and clarification for the council priority items discussed at the August 30th City Council Priorities Workshop. With consideration for time and council having reviewed the staff report and previous strategic priorities workshop presentation, would council prefer to go through the presentation item by item, or would council prefer to identify priority items to provide staff with direction and
Let's go through them for the
clarification?
public edification. Let's go through them as quickly as possible, one by one.
Item 1 was to update zoning code and design guidelines, residential and commercial, and explore reinstatement of the design review board. In August, that was 75% complete, and direction from council on August 30th, as understood by staff, is to keep as a top priority project and continue with project as outlined by staff.
Okay, next one.
Item 2 was to develop an accessory dwelling unit ADU ordinance, and staff's understanding of direction from council was to keep as a top priority project, consider hiring a consultant to move this project through completion, or consider staff capacity. Item 3 was to develop telecommunication ordinance consistent with federal law. And direction from council was to move the project to the completed list and change to 100% complete. Item 4 was to explore opportunities for permanent outdoor dining, and direction from council was that it was not designated as a top priority. Consider changing this priority item to develop a downtown master plan. Item 5 is review barriers to construction of affordable housing, and direction from council was to keep as a top priority project, continue with project as outlined by staff. Item 6 was to explore redevelopment of the North Lot at Sunset Center, and direction from council was to not designate this as a top priority. Consider location as a possible housing element opportunity site. Item 7 was the police public works building renovation project. Direction from council on August 30th was to keep as a top priority project, continue with project as outlined by staff, consider a bond to help finance the project, and increase the percentage complete to 30%. Item 8 was to review opportunities for enhanced fire ambulance service, and direction from council was to keep as a top priority project, consider other options in addition to a joint powers agreement, such as the contracting fire services with CAL FIRE, appoint an ad hoc committee consisting of Mayor Pro Tem Richards, Councilmember Barron, Acting Police Chief Watkins, Fire Chief Panholzer, as well as community members. Item 9 was to develop a plan to ensure that the city's natural areas, as well as private property, are properly maintained to reduce fire risk. Direction from council on August 30th was to keep as a top priority project, complete the wildfire risk assessment plan, agendize discussion on ways to educate the public on mitigating fire risks on their private property, and evacuation planning, as well as to focus on removing dead trees and continue private property inspections for fire risks. Item 10 was to develop an urban forest master plan, or UFMP, and update the tree ordinance. Direction from council was to keep as a top priority project and continue with project as outlined by staff. Item 11 was the stormwater ordinance update, and direction from council was to keep as a top priority project and continue with project as outlined by staff. Item 12 was the volunteer oversight / facilitation item. Direction from council on August 30th was that this item was not designated as a top priority, to continue with project as outlined by staff, and consider changing the priority name to volunteer oversight, facilitation, and appreciation. Item 13 was to increase beautification efforts, which is ongoing. Direction from staff, direction from council on August 30th was to keep as top priority project, continue with project as outlined by staff, add more sidewalk cleaning, consider quarterly awards to businesses who have the most clean and beautiful businesses, fronts and sidewalk areas as an incentive. Item 14 was to develop a facilities maintenance plan or a facility renovation projects. And direction from council at that time was to keep as a top priority project, continue with project as outlined by staff. Item 15 was the item of undergrounding utilities Rule 20A, and direction from council on August 30th was to keep as a top priority project, continue with project as outlined by staff. Item 16 was explore opportunities for the Scout House. Direction from council on August 30th was to review the California Department of Housing and Community Development findings, to provide direction to staff on opportunities, priority level, and timeline. Item 17 was the Coastal Engineering Study and Climate Committee. And direction from council was that this item is not designated as a top priority and to continue with project as outlined by staff. Item 18 was to review, reformulate approach to reserves, update financial policies. Direction from council was that this is not designated as a top priority and to continue with project as outlined by staff. Item 19 was to develop and implement a social media plan. Direction from council was that this is not designated as a top priority. Consider changing the priority to communication with residents as a title and focus on ways to get information out, such as newsletters for residents and emergency alerts. Item 20 was to explore opportunities for Flanders Mansion. Direction from council on August 30th was to receive presentation from staff before the end of the year and provide direction based on options presented. Item 21 was street addresses. Direction from council on August 30th was to keep as a top priority project, provide direction to staff in November after receiving an update. Item 22 was to explore parking and traffic management program, and direction from council on August 30th was to keep as a top priority project, provide direction to staff in November after receiving an update. And this last slide are new items for consideration and direction. And these are items that were brought up by one or more council members as potential new priorities at that workshop. And staff's understanding of council direction for each item that was brought up was for the outdoor wine tasting ordinance was to add as a new priority to appoint an ad hoc committee consisting of Mayor Potter and Councilmember Barron. 2 was the Carmel Area Wastewater District, or COD, Carmel River Bridge to Everywhere project. And that was to add as a new priority, priority on annexing Rio Park property. 3 was the transient occupancy tax, or TOT, increase. That was explore adding to the 2024 ballot. And that's to add as a new priority, consider increased TOT funds to finance the police building project and other infrastructure. 4 was the board and commissioner training, and that was to consider adding as a new priority. Undergrounding power lines, which is a bigger project separate from the Rule 20A priority as discussed, and that item was to consider adding as a new priority. Number 6 was Car Week impacts and safety, which has been discussed, but direction at that time was to consider adding as a new priority.
Excellent. Thank you. Very well done. Thank you. Appreciate your brevity. Is there anybody in the council wishing to ask any questions at this time? I would think not, since we've discussed this extensively at the workshop. All right, let's open it up to the public. Is there anybody in the public wishing to comment on any of these items tonight?
Good evening, Nancy Toomey with the Carmel Residents Association Board. And on behalf of the board, you received in your information packet a summary of how your strategic priorities align to the recent survey of our membership. And we called out a bunch of the kind of highlights so you didn't have to weed back through the full summary to save time on your part, but we welcome you to dig in to the full survey content, as it had lots of suggestions from the constituents that you represent. I do want to just call out one additional item beyond what was submitted in the packet, or reinforcing, is that universally there was no support for the paid parking. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, City Administrator Rehrig, other staff members. My name is Louis Leader. I live in Carmel Valley. I first moved to the Monterey Peninsula 5 decades ago, and through my work in journalism, took me away. I've always considered the Monterey Peninsula my home. Our daughter graduated Carmel High. As a newspaper reporter and editor for 27 years, I both covered and supervised Carmel-by-the-Sea issues, and I was the Herald city editor during the period when Clint Eastwood was mayor. I also worked as in public information for the city from 2013 to 2018, and with a mutual amicable agreement with the city administrator, Rurig, I moved on. I'm here just to talk briefly about Flanders Mansion. First of all, I really appreciate the fact that the City Council is making it a top priority. I recognize that one of your goals is to come up with a solution to this issue. It's been under discussion for some 25 years with various proposals, including selling it, which the still coalescing Flanders Mansion Restoration Steering Committee, of which I am a part, does not favor. This devoted and concerned group of Carmelites is headed by filmmaker Mike Buffo, who is a fourth-generation Monterey Peninsula resident. The group's proposal, which is now in draft form, and this is a document we're working on, would respect Flanders Mansion's rich history and also present a path for its future, which would honor the mansion and make it a haven for artists, educators, and the community at large, while respecting Carmel-by-the-Sea's traditions and the special place it holds in its history. We request that you put Flanders Mansion on the city agenda in the near future so that we can present our comprehensive, forward-thinking, and exciting plan for restoring the historic property, and so you can carefully weigh our proposal. We're looking forward to collaborating with you on the restoration of the Flanders Mansion. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Lou. Nice to see you again. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening, David O'Neill again. I've been working with Mike Buffo and looking at his plan, and it is really comprehensive. It answers all of the different needs that the facility is looking for, and I'm very excited to hopefully show it to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Is there anybody else wishing to speak?
Are you a VIP or a CRA?
Oh, sorry. I'm just David.
All right, is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Don't hesitate.
Melanie Billig, back on undergrounding. Thank you so much for putting this on your priority list. I really appreciate it, and I know the residents will too. I mean, there's been a long period of refusal to recognize undergrounding because it's summarily dismissed because it's too expensive. We just can't possibly do it. And I would just suggest that, you know, with the elimination of power outages, the fire safety aspects of this, the money that the community would save by those two things alone, let alone their insurance, property insurance, and then you'd throw on top the aesthetics of this project. I think there's just so many win-wins for it that we really need to look at it very, very closely. And as some of you know, I was very much involved a number of years ago when Ken was mayor, and I was asked to chair a committee of citizens on that. We did a report, and the Public Works Director supported it, the forester supported it, and basically the community supported it. I won't go into why it wasn't effectuated because that becomes political, but I think there would be a lot of support for that right now, given, you know, the storms and the outages, and a lot of people were out for over a week. So, you know, this makes sense, and thank you again for putting it on your list, and if there's anything I can do to help move it along, I'll be there in a second. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Melanie. Is there anybody else wishing to testify? Is anybody in Zoom world wishing to speak tonight? Nova?
There's no hands raised on Zoom.
The last call. Is there anybody in the room wishing to speak? All right, to bring it back to council for deliberation. Council members, your thoughts? I'd just briefly say, specific to Flanders, I'm going to maybe draft a member for an ad hoc. Alessandra? Ad hoc?
Oh, sure.
You and I?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Okay.
I do have a question there. I have a question about what would it take to get the undergrounding on the ballot to be, for an assessment to the citizens?
The cost associated, we want to know the cost of that. But I think after that, it'd be simply an action of the council. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So I think that's a direction I wouldn't mind seeing us go. I'd also like to see the same thing happen with the TOT. Maybe we bundle them both together, I don't know. Jeff?
Yeah, I'm certainly in favor of the TOT. I would be interested in working on the undergrounding project, but I think that there's a lot of work to do before we got to the point of, I don't know when our deadline would be. I think it's probably like August or something like that.
Probably July.
To get it on the ballot, but there's a lot of work that we as a city would have to do before I would feel comfortable. I would be willing to put in the extra effort to do that myself, but before I would feel comfortable sort of voting to
Put that on the
put
ballot.
it on the ballot. Some 20 or 30 year assessment district that taxed people, $2,000 a year. I mean, it's a lot of money, and there's a lot of unanswered questions.
What's our next step? We
I
have
heard-
to make
I
a
heard
step towards that.
volunteer for an ad hoc.
Yeah, I would work on it
Yeah.
with
Want to be on it?
I think Karen does, right, Karen?
Karen? Karen, teach you not to come to a meeting.
I'm on a lot of ad hocs.
Karen?
What about Alessandra? You've expressed a lot of interest in it.
Well, yeah, it ties in with the whole cell tower issue that we've been saying, is that we do support undergrounding. Sure.
How about that?
So you drafted for 2 now.
I know.
Flanders and undergrounding,
And then
all right.
my other comments were, Brandon, it still says the ADU is on track to present to the Planning Commission in October or November. And, I've told you I'm going to hold your feet to the fire every time I see this. And are we still on track?
We should be there in November for the draft. Discuss with them, yeah.
Okay. And then just a note, item 17 is, I don't know that this really matters, but item 17 is the Coastal Engineering Study and Climate Committee, and I'm not sure why it's not a high priority, and I don't really matter. I don't know if it really matters that it's not a high priority, but we reconstituted the Climate Committee yesterday to do this exact thing.
Yep.
So,
I think that's a good point, Jeff.
I think it should be a high priority. I mean, we're gonna make some sort of recommendation to the council or something to do something. So maybe it's just a matter of semantics, and we'll just go on our way anyway. But I think the word "high" should be in there for that. That's my.
Given the increase in the waves up in the run up on the waters, when the abutments and everything, I think we should be a good study of that, a good look at
Yeah,
that.
and we won't be in time to get it done this year, but maybe we'll see. We'll see where we are. So those are my comments.
Okay, so any other thoughts or comments?
Yes.
Yes, Karen.
Yeah, I too wondered why the coastal engineering wasn't a higher priority considering what we're experiencing. So I'm glad to see that Jeff brought that up. I think we saw tonight how much fun and how much volunteers appreciate being appreciated. So I'd like to see the volunteer oversight, facilitation, appreciation bumped up a little bit, because we're depending on our volunteers more and more and more, and I think it should be a higher priority. Social media, I never really thought about it until I actually saw the social media outreach that our local waste management district does. Regen just does an incredible job with their educational outreach through their social media. And Nancy Toomey does a fantastic job on presenting the CRA stuff on Facebook. And, I know some people don't like Nextdoor, but it can be a valuable source of spreading information, good information that the city wants to do. So I don't think we should ignore it. It's happening all around us. And I don't think that our Friday vlog is reaching enough people, particularly the people who don't live in town and might benefit from some of the information we could pass on. I would love to keep addresses right up there. If you read the reports from the police and fire. There were 2 incidences where they couldn't find the place because of address discrepancies. And, you know, if that's a heart attack, that's a problem. There was also recently I think one of these days we're having a nationwide emergency. They're going to ring our bells and our cell phones and everything soon, but social media can help with that as well. And I'm not ready to kill paid parking. I really am not. I think we have a big problem downtown, and I think we should definitely see it through to a little bit more understanding. And as far as Flanders, there are more people interested than just Mr. Buffo. So if we do anything, it should be a transparent RFP or something like that, where other people in the community who are interested in that property would have an opportunity to express their interest again. So those are the things that, to me, popped out. I do think we have an awful lot of stuff on this list. And at one time, we culled off some of the things that should just be normal staff stuff that they do. And maybe we could do that process again. Also, one other item that we are going to have to start paying attention to is coming up with the objective design guidelines in case we have any affordable housing projects suggested in the very near future. We do not want to be on the back end of that. We want to have our objective design guidelines of how we would want projects to look in place so that we are not on the reaction side of that equation. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. All right. So let me think here. There was one I wanted to go ahead. That was the training for the new commissioners. I think that's important.
Attorney.
Yeah. So I think wouldn't we agree that we're going to have the attorney do that on a regular basis? Nova, you told me earlier that there has been training going on.
Yes, we have been doing training whenever a new member is appointed, and it's done with the attorney for the Brown Act or ethics training, and then also department heads do their own onboarding to go over.
Maybe you should take a look at it and see what could be a little more effective, because some of them don't seem to quite understand some of the ground rules they should be playing by.
I think that Dave brings up a really interesting point, and I think that that's related to sort of my comments that I made as strategic planning. A lot of it is not just like what the Brown Act is and what the Public Records Act is. A lot of it is just how to be a commissioner and like whether we need, and I'm not sure that that's really stuff that the attorney has covered in the past. And maybe it's more of a handbook, you know, like a 15-page handbook sort of thing. Like, here's how meetings work, and here's what you can do and what you can't do, and here's how you take direction, and here's how you work with staff. You know, we've had some issues with that. So I'm not sure. I think we had sort of talked about having Brian do it, but maybe Brian and Nova is a more is a better team to do that.
Sure, that's fine with me.
You're drafted.
I mean, we have an existing handbook, but we could go through it and update it and see when needs to be
something that you
changed.
can just hand to like new commissioners. Like, here's all this other stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I want to chime in here on that, having been on a commission for 16 years. There is not enough training. There's not enough training and a sort of standardization of how you hold a meeting. I mean, there are certain protocols that slip by the wayside if they're not enforced. Like, you know, you hear the staff report, you ask questions, you don't make comments, then you open to public, then you bring it back for comments. If that falls off by the wayside, it doesn't take very long for meetings to get a little bit out of control. So I think training is more than the Brown Act, more than ethics. It's like Jeff said, how to be a good commissioner. And part of that is being present. I see a lot of commission meetings where people are absent. And when you don't have a full contingent of commissioners, I think it's not as good a process. unless everybody is there and there's consistency. So I think that that's very, very valid. And also, when you are a commissioner, it seems as though you're held to a little higher standard as to listening to all the public, as well as coming there with some of the research that you've done on your own. And then also being fair to all applicants as much as possible, not just ones that you like the ideas and ones that you don't like the ideas. So,
Well said,
yeah,
Karen, well said.
be good.
Brian's.
Okay, Brian, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I would just say that our office will certainly be willing to help Nova and other staff members to provide whatever training council directs, and as well as to take a look at the manual. I agree with Councilmember Barron about it's more than just knowing what the rules are. It's how to run a meeting and how to act at a meeting as well. So we could check the manual to make sure it includes that information. And then once the manual's been updated, then we could have a training session to kind of go over it to reinforce that.
Both Brian, Jeff, and Karen have said exactly what I was thinking too, so I appreciate that. To the new priorities on the list, wine tasting ordinance, we've got an ad hoc committee on that. The Carmel area wastewater bridge to everywhere project, I'm the new designee to that. I volunteered to go serve, and I served in my first meeting last Friday. That's underway. Transit occupancy tax increase, we said we'd explore the opportunities to put it on 2024 ballot. We can have some discussion about that. Just did board and commissioners training, we just talked about undergrounding powered utilities, formed an ad hoc for that. I believe that's Jeff and Karen, or Jeff and Alessandra. And then we've had the kind of discussion about car week impacts and safety. We just had extensive discussion on that. What else do we want to discuss, guys? Staff clear?
I just need to clarify something. So are we adding car week impacts to the priority list, or is that just a regular thing?
I think it's a regular work project. I mean, it's ongoing.
It's going to happen next year.
Yeah.
So we're adding it to the priority list?
It's going to be a priority forever.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
the ad hoc committee for the wine tasting,
That's Jeff and I.
okay.
It's already been formed.
And then the COD item is being added as well?
Yep.
Okay.
That's minimal work on our part, honestly. COD's going to do, we were just providing moral support. I mean, we've got a piece of property that they need access through, but that's not a big deal. All right, are we clear?
Yes.
Okay, by consensus, all right. Let's move on then to the next item, which is Esperanza public hearing. This is a consideration of a resolution overturning the July 2023 decision of the Historic Resources Board and issuing a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards with new findings and conditions for the construction of a mixed-use building with subterranean parking area on a portion of the North in California Savings and Loan Complex site located at Dolores 2nd Street Northwest, the southeast of 7th Avenue in the Service Commercial Zoning District. All righty. What?
And you don't want to.
Yeah, you got to recuse. Yeah, Bobby Richards needs to recuse himself from this. So, Bobby, could you explain why?
I'll be recused because I own property near this near this business.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
You got it.
Wait, it's not. I'm not recusing for that. I'm recusing because I'm a part of.
Yeah, you got to.
I got two recusals.
Yeah,
Okay.
good. That's good enough. All righty.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, Council. So in July of this year, the HRB issued a determination of consistency, finding the project consistent with the Secretary's standards. The Council enacted the right of review of the HRB's decision consistent with the procedures outlined in the Municipal Code. At the September Council meeting, the Council considered the HRB's decision and directed staff to prepare specific findings and conditions based on the Council's discussion. Staff has returned with the revised resolution based on feedback from the Council. The resolution overturns the HRB's decision and finds the project consistent with the Secretary's standards as conditioned. So just to clarify where we are today, adoption of the determination of consistency does not constitute approval of the project. The project will still be required to be approved by the Planning Commission as the final action. Council's only considering the determination of consistency. So just to summarize some of the findings that were made, the concrete wall is a character-defining feature of the site. The south portion of the wall is still intact and reveals the original stone pattern and retains its historical significance. The project as proposed would violate the Secretary of Interior standards. The concrete wall is a distinctive feature of the complex, and the complex is subordinated by the proposed development. And then some of the conditions of approval that were included, just to summarize them, that the original concrete wall shall remain in its original configuration and location. The existing spatial relationship of the site needs to be preserved, and the applicant will need to revise the plans to preserve the context of the site as viewed from 7th Avenue as well as Dolores Street. So what was proposed was a preservation buffer, the details of which were outlined in the staff report. It basically is just to summarize, a no-build zone. So that's identified in red on the slide. And then based on the council discussion, staff is also recommending a waiver from the build to line, which is effectively the opposite of a setback. So generally, we'll have to build within 2 feet of a property line. So this would allow as a benefit to the applicant, almost like an exception, or it's not quite a variance, it's just a waiver from the requirement that they have to build within 2 feet of the property line. This isn't a mandate or a requirement. It's just as they're revising the plans, if it's helpful to them to be able to build farther away from the property line to preserve the wall or views of the wall, they could do so. And with that, staff recommends that the council adopt a resolution overturning the July 2023 decision of the Historic Resources Board and issue a determination of consistency. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Evan. Are there any questions, Evan, by staff right now, by council right now? I don't see any.
Council, you did receive a lot of correspondence, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, and it's all been distributed to you and is available for the public as well. Sorry, Mr.
Is there a representative of the applicant present? Where? Okay, so does one of you want to speak to this project? June Solano. June, you have the floor. How much time do you need for presentation?
Oh, not 2 minutes, less than.
You want to save any time for rebuttal?
Sure, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, June. Okay, I'll
Thank
set the
you.
clock
Good
for
evening.
5 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor Potter, City Council members, and City staff. June Soliano, architect for JB Pastor Building. In behalf of the owners, we would like to manifest that we concur with the city hired historian, city planning staff, and as approved by the HRB, that the concrete wall is not historic. We will await the City Council's decision, including the final resolution. We will then review and discuss with the owners our option. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, June. I appreciate your brevity. All right, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item tonight? Don't hesitate to come forward.
Mayor Potter, your honorable body, Kent Seavey, Historic Preservation Consultant. I think this is one of the best standards reviews I've seen by the planning department, predicated on saving a very important piece of public art and for dealing with your own rules in a reasonable manner to make this a better project. And I admire the work done, and I would suggest you don't change a thing.
Thank you, Kent. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to testify tonight?
Good evening, David again, excuse me. Just speaking on behalf of myself. I totally respect the process that this is going through and do not disagree with whatever decision is made. But I do feel like, as somebody who's done a big project in a small community before, there can also be a light touch. about the way that you handle things. I think that there could be, in this situation, a lot of personal emotions that kind of come up for the client and his staff, and if there's any way to kind of mitigate that with a personal, respectful address, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening, Mayor Potter, members of the staff, and the City Council. My name is Cindy Lloyd. 40 years ago, a man died who was the Mayor Pro Tem of Carmel City Council. That man was Frank Lloyd. He was my father. He came to Carmel as a boy when he was 4 years old, and he loved Carmel with a passion. My grandparents had Mike Murphy build a house for them, and he spent his formative years here. He married a woman who was my mother, Marjorie Lloyd. She was at one time the editor of the Carmel Pinecone. She was also considered the informal historian for Carmel. They instilled in me both a love for Carmel and a respect for the history. As we went around Carmel, my mother would point out the historic properties, and they just became a part of me. I worked for Walter Berdy. I knew Walter Berdy personally. I grew up with his daughters. I knew Will Shaw personally. And through Walter, I met Brad Bowman and learned about his work. And it was spectacular. It was sensitive. The walls that he made around the Savings and Loan Complex reflect art in a public place. Instead of just having a building to house some money and have people come and go, they added some beautiful pieces that the public could enjoy walking up and down the streets. I support the retention of the wall as part of the historic complex. I think the staff report was brilliant and the resolution was well written. I urge you to accept them both, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Is there anybody else wishing to testify tonight? Be shy.
Members of the council and Mr. Mayor, at the last meeting, I thought you really got into this subject very well, handled it beautifully, and now you have recommendations coming back from staff. Wonderful job the staff has done. I support these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Alex Shebet. Some of you knows me as a local artist, but today I will talk as a city branding specialist. I graduated from Korea University in 2013, and my major is public administration and urban management. South Korea is one of the 4 tigers, dragons, who shows economic miracle, and I've learned a lot from them. For example, a historical building or another object has low value for city's economy if it's not attraction for tourists. The wall we're talking about today is just a wall. It's not an attraction yet. And how to make it useful for the city? Solution, it can be replaced or placed back on the yard as it was offered, and make a memorial from it. The other piece of it can be represented in the local gallery. History has lots of examples when outdoor art objects were moved. For example, a sculpture of Rocky Balboa in Philadelphia. It was moved downstairs, and more tourists are able to take pictures with it now. So it's more traffic next to that attraction. There are different sorts of artists. Some people take pictures, some paint with oil or acrylic, some make sculptures from clay and marble. Some of them make NFTs. But there is a special group of artists who work with big 3D objects. They create buildings and develop cities. Such art needs huge resources and responsibility. This is a high level to be an artist. There are 2 bright examples when developers build masterpieces. I mean, one blueprint, one city. In 1791, French engineer Pierre L'Enfant was appointed to design the city of Washington by President George Washington. The only other example of such a developing is St. Petersburg in Russia by Jean-Baptiste Alexandre Leblond, who is also a French guy, the foreigner. In the end, I want to say that, guys, look at our world. I think there are more walls in this world than bridges. Walls of misunderstanding, walls of pain, walls of wars, walls of discrimination. But humans need more bridges, bridges of compassion, bridges of empathy, bridges of friendship, and bridges of happiness. Only artists can build them. And it doesn't matter if it's an artist who creates oil paintings or beautiful buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your testimony. I love the shirt. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening, Mayor, councilmen, and women. People ask me, are you the artist?
Can we get your name for the record?
My name is Craig Rose, and I am an artist. My art has been connecting people my whole life and being around artists on the biggest days, whether that's Super Bowl, the Grammys, Warner Brothers, or the lowest days, whether that's suicide or jail. I've seen art. My favorite artist, Shepard Fairey, Banksy. When you look at what they do, they disrupt things. I didn't come here looking for an argument or a fight. I came here for artists. When I see what's going on, we created something because we didn't feel our message was heard last week. Alessandra, the city didn't ask you to do this and bring this out, but you've took on this cause, and I've surveyed over 500 people. I have over 100 hours of video footage of me just running this installation called The Wall at my gallery because I'm new to town. And I just asked people, should we tear down the wall or should we keep the wall? And over and over and over and over, all I heard was tear down the wall. Why are we holding on to this wall? So when I look through the paper and I see stuff like businessman arrested for assaulting deputy, or PG mom claims racism at Robert Downey School. These are real issues that I'm bringing up. This is real issues that art is bringing up, that Patrice, I've heard him reference as an outsider. He's a brilliant man, and his art is brilliant. He's offered, as well as I have, to house this wall in another place. There's no reason that this wall needs to stay on a concrete. I have talked to numerous people that don't even pay attention to this wall. This has now gone violent, and it's silly. Alessandra, you can't even look me in the eyes. You can't even respond to an email, or you can't even respond to any of this. People have said you've changed once you've come into this council, and I will say things in this city that hasn't been said because they need to be said. You have a man, a generous man that you guys asked to take over the pit, to buy the pit, and now you're stonewalling him. And I say, Mayor, this is whether we want to call classism or racism. I've been around this game. You can Google who my uncle is. He's a resident of Pebble Beach. I've been around wealthy people. I've been around artists, and I've seen what you're doing to block a guy that you think is too important or too wealthy, but he has a heart here. And you guys are not hearing the response of this community. Alessandra, by not even responding and looking at me in the face, you know I am telling the truth. I hope you hear it.
Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Anybody else on Zoom? Okay, we got Logan Miles Allison is speaking. Logan, the floor is yours.
Unmute. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so once again, my name is Logan Miles Allison. I've seen places grow for the better, and I've seen them fall for the worst. I endorse goodness when I speak, and I speak the truth. Simplicity comes with authority, and it's very powerful and true and straight to the point. And the council cannot get sidetracked today with the background noise. The city has to see the truth of the facts. They must see that Patrice is a beacon of light, and he is hope and good for growth and goodness for the whole city. He maybe and might already have independently helped Carmel more than anyone in the town themselves. He's an artist who wants to make the city better, and hopefully, unintentionally, the council seems like it has been trying to dim this beacon of light and growth. By allowing Patrice to work is moving up a major ladder in the world, especially for a bohemian art culture. We've had some people who showed up today that are here to quote unquote save the art that they still call the wall. Patrice wants to up the standard and make the haven for the world's best art, including to help preserve a work of art which everybody keeps calling a wall, which has already been partly destroyed. and which is unknown and unshowcased properly to 99.9% of the community and visitors there. We must push to help those who want better. And I know that people were not heard or noticed a couple weeks ago because I was there present. And I hope that today the council can actually listen to the people of their own town instead of wanting to go behind doors for their own control. And that's it. Bada bing, bada boom.
Thank you, Logan. Appreciate the testimony. Holly, peace. Holly, the floor is yours.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay, great.
There you go.
This is my first council meeting, and I'm, really appreciative of the council and all of the staff. And there was a comment that no one looks at the wall or sees the wall. And I want to say that I remember when the wall was built, because I grew up here and moved back just 6 years ago. And I do notice the wall. So I think, the council has a very, and the staff have a very important job to be stewards of the village. And I support, the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Appreciate your testimonies. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Last call in Zoom world. Bring it in here. June, Solano, did you want to rebut anything? Nope. Okay, apparently not. Okay, yes, come forward.
I haven't been here the whole time. Shaheen Al-Nuaimi, resident and business owner. Are we going to address any assault that was done to Mr. Rose?
I'm sorry, that's not the item before us right now.
Are we going to eventually?
It's not the actual item before us, sir.
Fantastic answer. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, is there anybody else with Dale Byrne? Dale, you have your hand up.
Hold on, I have to unmute him, sorry.
Oh. Dale, you're getting unmuted.
Dale, go ahead.
There you go. Dale, the floor is yours. Dale.
Hello?
Dale, you never heard a lot of swords.
Hi. I don't think anybody in the council knows.
Oh, you spoke already. It's Dale Byrne speaking now.
Connection, I guess.
Dale, go ahead.
Who saved me? Me? Dead. Okay. Karen's still there?
Dale,
I'm
we can
still
hear you.
here, but, there I am. But everything went dark except Holly Pease's name, and we could not hear the next speaker.
Yeah, we're still on the Zoom call, but they're not.
We can hear you, Mr. Byrne. You can go ahead and
hear you
speak.
fine, Dale.
Okay. That's a tough act to follow, those acts, but I'm going to give it a try here. It seems that it should be an extraordinary situation that would require the city council to overrule all the large number of professionals and dedicated members of our commissions who have put in so much time to make decisions like these two on this particular piece of property. And they've studied it extensively after getting input from the community. And I guess the question remains here, is this wall amount to an extraordinary situation? But in addition, I think there's an even bigger question, and I know I've brought this up before at other meetings, including the Forest and Beach Commission meeting, is how do these protests and how do these items get on the agenda in the first place? Because it's a really important thing, and one of the powers that the mayor has to bring these subjects onto the agenda. And I'm concerned in this case, and I'm not even speaking necessarily of the wall, but I'm concerned about how these protests can start, and especially when they're started by commissioners, and then they reach the level of getting on the agenda after that. As this is being started by a council person, in this case, Alessandra, who fortunately is very passionate about historical subjects, but it could have been a lot of other things too. And the council people have a big advantage over the general public in that they can easily influence another council member, as happened in this case, because the exact same letter was issued by both Karen and Alessandra. They have unlimited comment time, which I only have 3 right now, and I'm probably going to barely achieve it. And they also get a vote, which the public doesn't get. I think it's much better for council members, if they're passionate about a subject, to participate in the public process that took place in the first place, in this case, a couple of them, and speak out passionately about that subject to influence the decision of the professionals and the dedicated residents who have dedicated their time to the commission and on this subject in particular, and they feel strongly about it, but go to those meetings and make your voice heard so that the correct decision is made in the first place. And in this case, it's even multiple ones. I don't know how much time I have left, but regardless of the merits of this wall, the HRB overriding decisions and everything else that we just talked about are delaying significant and important projects in this village. At the very time we are committed to adding 349 housing units, despite multiple favorable decisions by the HEB, and I was there. I was the only person at the pit at the very first meeting. I was the only person there other than Stephanie Locke that looked at all the materials, and I talked to every single person that was there. And I've got to tell you, the city, the architects, everybody was over the moon about this project. And then it got voted down 5-0. And I went to Brandon the next day and told him that just should never happen. And it happened. And now it's happened multiple times. And then it got reversed multiple times. So we're trying to add housing units. And despite those decisions being very positive by the city, these protests and reversals are definitely delaying this and in turn perhaps other projects by this developer, which would add the first non-single family housing units in a long time.
Dale,
And
if
at the
you'd
same
summarize,
time,
I'd appreciate it.
I will. I've got one more sentence. At the same time, those delays, the proposed project on this property, which would follow our current zoning guidelines, could end up being adjusted to much looser guidelines, which are being thrust on the city by the state, perhaps greatly favoring the developer. We have
you, Dale.
recently seen.
Thank you. No applause. No applause. No applause. Up or down? You like it? You like this? Like this? Up or down? Okay. Bring it back to council and for deliberation. Council members, your druthers.
Mr. Mayor, we already deliberated this last month, and I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Yeah, I have a comment.
Sure.
Just one quick comment on page 181 of the packet. City Council conditions number 3, preservation of site context. Is this, shall we talking to? I'll just talk to staff. Is that Evan? It says, and I'm trying to understand this. It says changes to be considered include but are not limited to articulation of the front elevation, reducing and minimizing the mass of the structure, blah blah blah. This changes to be considered. Does that mean these changes are required? Okay, so could we? So just to be clear on that, could we say that? So could we change the language from changes to be considered include to changes should include, but do you understand what I'm saying? Like it makes it sound like these changes in this thing are sort of optional. Changes to be considered should include, and I would like it to be more forceful in terms of.
You can use the verb shall. I mean, or adverb
Well, I'm
shall.
asking for
specifics.
I'm asking, like, my intent was to really ask: are these changes supposed to be required, or are they maybe optional? Like, these are the changes we talked about last week. So, are these changes in the staff report? Maybe they should do these things, or are these changes in the staff report? They should do these things.
So those are the changes that you discussed last month. It's written the way it is because maybe one design change might negate another design change. I didn't want it to say like you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4 because one design change might not cause another design change to be necessary.
Could we strengthen the? So I understand what you're saying, and I was really asking for your opinion, and so thank you for that. Could we strengthen it a little bit by just saying changes to be considered should include, and I'll differentiate that from must include, but should is maybe a little bit less forceful than must.
I don't know, Brum. Does staff understand the direction?
Do you understand? Just include the word should after changes to be considered include. So it would be changes to be considered should include. Yes. That's my ask. Is that okay?
Make you happy with that?
So I would ask Alessandra and Karen if they're okay with that change since it's their motion.
Alessandra, you're fine with that?
I don't have it in front of me. Can I see that, please?
Yeah, it's there. Oops.
Karen, are you familiar with what Jeff's talking about?
Yes.
Okay, you comfortable with it?
Yes, should is not as strong as shall, but in order not to tie the hands completely, for example, if the applicant wanted to bring their courtyard forward and put it to the side of building too, so that the courtyard would be open to the view of the art wall. That would be fine as well. You know, there are other things that the architect might be very creative about. The point is that the wall is part of the complex. The wall is important. And I think the most important thing was that we don't want the bank building complex completely overpowered, overshadowed by the new project. It should, as the standards say, be subordinate to the existing architectural resource. That's a very important part.
All right, Alessandra, you can comfortable with the amendment?
Yes, I'm fine with Jeff's change. Would you like me to read the full, no, I mean the full text of the consideration of the resolution?
No, I think you're fine. You want to go ahead and read it? I understand it. Do you understand?
No, I don't need, I mean, I don't.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't think we need to read.
I understand. You don't have to.
Good. Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? I don't see any. Okay, we'll call the roll.
Okay. Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramov?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All righty, we're done with that. We'll move on then to the next public hearing item, which is the historic designation. Consider Mills Act contract application MA 23-116 for the historic Mrs. Clinton Walker House located at 26336 Scenic Road in a single-family residential neighborhood, District 1, R1 district. Where is our staff person? Oh, there she is.
Oh, I can.
Catherine, I believe this is yours. Yeah, I know.
Good evening. Tonight you have 4 Mills Act contracts. Thank you. In front of you. And as a quick reminder, the council did review the Mills Act policy in April of this year and looked at a number of issues, one being whether to put a property value limit on eligible properties or to limit the program to, say, residential properties and not commercial, or to change the number of contracts that you could approve in any given time period. And the council decided not to make any changes to the program at that time. So that brings us here tonight to our first application. I'll warn you, this one, I'll go a little bit slower just to provide a refresher on the policy, and then the following 3 applications will go a little bit quicker. So our first application is the Mrs. Clinton Walker House, also known as the Frank Lloyd Wright House. This property is located at 26336 Scenic Road. It was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1948 to 1950 and built in 1951-52 by Miles Bain and Walter Olds for the original owner, Mrs. Della Clinton Walker. The home is designed in the organic style, also called Usonian or Wrightian, and it has a landscape design by Thomas Church. And I just want to share this early correspondence because it's so fascinating. In 1945, the original owner, Miss Walker, wrote to Frank Lloyd Wright and said, "I own a rocky point of land in Carmel, California, extending into the Pacific Ocean. The surface is flat. It is located at the end of a white sand beach. I'm a woman living alone, and I wish protection from wind and privacy from the road, and a house as enduring as the rocks, but as transparent and charming as the waves, and as delicate as a seashore. You are the only man who can do this. Will you help me?" And Frank Lloyd Wright responded, "Dear Mrs. Walker, I liked your letter, brief and to the point." And that kicked off their working relationship. The client was so excited, she thought, if Mr. Wright did this for a stream, referring to falling water, what will he do for an ocean? So this is the result. These are some early sketches by Frank Lloyd Wright, as well as an aerial view where you could see the highly unique building footprint, almost like an arrow shape. These are some early historic photographs. The home is so famous for its ship-like prow. The stonework is Carmel stone. Originally, Wright had wanted to use a desert stone, like at his Taliesin property, but figured out that Carmel stone would definitely do the job. I'm just going to go through a few of the building's character-defining features, one being the fenestration. This is a view of the bedroom wing with redwood French doors and wind screens. And then looking out over the ocean, we have a hexagonal living room with panoramic glazing with a triangular ship-like prow. At the bottom right there is a photograph of the original owner. We have inverse stepped 3-tiered steel windows painted in Wright's signature color, Cherokee red. And then I included a photograph of the kitchen door, and Wright was notorious for stubbornly insisting on his design, but Mrs. Walker really put her foot down and said she needed a kitchen door to take her trash out, so she got her way. This is a really unique feature. The window sills have a vented slat to improve circulation. Just a little history, back in 2010, some of the windows were replaced. They were documented as deteriorated beyond repair, and so the city is going to use photographs like these to potentially use as a model for future window repairs as needed. This is a photograph of the interior fireplace. As you know, Mills Act maintenance plans apply really to the exterior of the building, but the chimney is an interior and exterior feature, so I photographed it here, and it's just beautiful. There is a red tinted concrete floor that will be repaired. Here's a photograph on the top of the original roof, which has been replaced over the years. At the top, it was originally a ceramic product that was then leaking by the 50s, so it was replaced with copper, and that copper roof was again replaced in 1997. And then we also have the Frank Lloyd Wright designed driveway gate with a trapezoidal design, and that also dates to Wright's design. And then at the driveway gate, we have a planter, a circular planter, originally filled with glass illuminated spheres. And of course, there's also a fence that dates to 2001, but was built to Wright's original design. So there's one addition on the property. After the home was complete, the original owner requested an addition, and Frank Lloyd Wright designed one. He then passed away, and his addition design was expanded upon by the owner's grandson and ultimately built as a master bedroom. Here's some photos of that addition. And then the iconic sculpture was also a later addition to the property. A few other things have happened on the property. Nothing too substantial. One thing I'll note is in 2016, the city approved a bluff top retaining wall. The Coastal Commission did not approve it, and so the applicant did withdraw that application. So this evening, the maintenance plan does not include any erosion, any seawalls. That would be fully in the power of the Coastal Commission. And then in 2018, there was repairs done to the stone wall of the house itself, the prow. So just quickly, a review of what is the Mills Act Historical Property Contract. It's an incentive program for properties listed on the Carmel Register. You have to be on the register to obtain the benefit. This particular property was added to the register in 2016. Additionally, it's listed on the California and national registers. So the Mills Act is a reduction in property tax in exchange for a commitment to rehabilitate, maintain, and preserve the resource. This property actually had a contract approved in 2020 under a previous owner. So the previous owner ultimately withdrew his application after the council approved it, and the contract was never recorded with the county. That's why we're here this evening. If it had been recorded, the contracts stay with the property through changes of ownership. The code requires the Historic Resources Board and the council to make 5 findings. So I'll go through all 5 now. Finding 1 says the building is designated as a historic resource by the city and is listed on the Carmel Register. This building is as I've described. Finding 2 says the proposed rehabilitation and maintenance plan is appropriate in scope and sufficient in detail to guide long-term rehabilitation, restoration, and maintenance. So I'll go through the maintenance plan for this property in more detail, but staff finds that it is more significant than routine maintenance. They're proposing approximately $1.3 million over the next 10 years, and I'll go through these items quickly one by one. As you can see, many of the windows require repair. And as I've described, a previous repair and replacement was done that can be used as a model. Some of the stone is requiring repair, as you can see from these photographs. The roof, the copper roof, is deteriorating and at some point will need to be replaced. Landscape maintenance is a common work item you see on the Mills Act plans. This landscape is done by a famous architect or landscape architect. Finding 3 talks about the proposed maintenance plan complying with the Secretary of the Interior standards that will not alter, diminish, or damage the character defining features. Finding 3 also talks about no past or future addition could increase the floor area of the property by more than 15%. As I talked about, there was an addition on this property, but it was done in 1960 closely to Wright's own design. So it is part of the historic design, part of the documented historic design. And of course, no work is proposed to further increase the floor area or add a second-story addition. Moving on to findings 4 and 5. 4 says the Mills Act contract will aid in offsetting the cost of rehabilitating and maintaining the resource. And then finding 5 says approval of the contract will represent an equitable balance of public and private interests and not result in a substantial adverse financial impact to the city. And following the council's discussion this spring, the HRB and the staff has the following points to make. Yes, there is a reduction in tax revenue, which the county assessor estimates at approximately 40 to 60%, although that estimate is highly variable year to year and property to property. The idea is that savings are reallocated to work plans, but it is not a one-for-one dollar exchange there. There's also a rule that the council can't approve more than 15 contracts in any 3-year rolling period. We're well under that cap right now. There is a portion of tax revenue that will still go to the city, and the council has found before that the value of historic preservation offsets loss of revenue. And they are planning to put $1.3 million into this property. So in conclusion, staff does recommend that the council enter into the Mills Act contract. I'm available for questions. We also have the applicant here, as well as the architect who composed the plan.
Thank you, Catherine. Are there any questions to Catherine by council members at this time? Jeff, are you trying to make
one question? Could you remind me again? So first, thank you for the explanation about the policy, the discussion that we had 6 months ago. Can you remind me again where exactly finding number 5 comes from? Does that come from our policy?
It's in the code, yes.
It's in the code.
Absolutely.
So the code is different than the policy?
They're not different. I believe the policy cites the code, and the policy document just has more background, but the findings in the code are necessary for the Historic Resources Board to make, and they reviewed this and said this application meets all 5 findings, and they recommended it come to you for review.
Okay, so we're required by law to find those 5 findings?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before I open it up to the public? Okay, did you say there was a representative of the applicant here?
Yes.
Does he want to speak? Chris, did you want to speak?
Yes, please.
Floor is yours.
Okay, it doesn't let me do video, which is probably better for everyone. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Sorry I'm not able to be there in person with you this evening. My name is Chris Mitchell. I act as Managing Director of Esperanza Carmel, who are the owners of the subject property. Following our successful presentation to the Historic Resources Board in August, I'm here today to present Frank Lloyd Wright's Cabin on the Rocks for consideration for the Mills Act. I'm sure you all, of course, know very well both the house and the architect. However, I'll briefly describe both just for context. Frank Lloyd Wright was an American architect. He designed more than 1,000 buildings over a creative period spanning 70 years and is widely regarded as the greatest architect in America, if not the world. This house is Frank Lloyd Wright's only beachfront property. It was commissioned by Mrs. Della Clinton Walker in June 1945. Construction was completed in 1952, and the property was later enlarged in 1956 to allow for a larger master suite. Della Walker enjoyed the house for the rest of her life, and it remained under the excellent stewardship of the family until the recent sale to Esperanza Carmel in February of this year. I think everyone would agree that this house is one of, if not Carmel's most significant properties from a historical standpoint, and that Frank Lloyd Wright is certainly one of the most important architects to have contributed to the town, again, if not the most. As the new stewards of this property, we're committed to the long-term rehabilitation, maintenance, and preservation of this very special property, not just for Carmel, but as it is widely regarded as one of Frank Lloyd Wright's most impressive houses. The house is already listed on the National Historic Register, the California Register of Historic Resources, the Carmel-by-the-Sea's Historic Register, and was previously considered and approved for the Mills Act by this City Council about 2 years ago. Finally, it's recently been suggested that as we don't agree that a fairly generic concrete wall should be considered historic in nature, that we don't care about historic property. I hope the fact that we're proposing to spend over $1 million a year restoring this genuinely historic property should represent our commitment to Carmel and protecting its unique history and character. As usual, I'd like to thank Chip Rarig, Brandon Swanson, in particular Catherine Wallace for her excellent presentation, as well as the rest of the team at the City for their help in the consideration of this application. Along with our historic expert, Chris Barlow from WRD, we're both here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate your testimony.
Pleasure.
Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Good evening, City Council, Mayor, staff. Really appreciate the thorough professionalism with the process, in particular Catherine's presentation. It was excellent. So I really actually would just like to say that this has been a privilege
Sebastian,
to work
can you
on.
unmute? Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Privilege to work on this project, and I also would like to be present for any technical questions, but also yield the rest of my time to some other historic experts that I've seen in the room. I believe there's another Catherine that literally wrote the book on this house, along with Kent Seavey, who did the original report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Do come forward.
I believe some other person's material is up here, but I'll just push it aside if that's okay. Good evening to the mayor and other members of the council. My name is Catherine Smith. I am a Frank Lloyd Wright scholar. I have been doing that since 1972. And I've written several books on Frank Lloyd Wright. I've written a number of articles on Frank Lloyd Wright. And since, may I adjust this? Is that all right? Oh, time's going. Since 2018, I have been dedicated to the project of this particular house, which is under consideration to you at this moment. First of all, I have to say right now, I have to straighten out the name of the original client for Frank Lloyd Wright. It was a woman, and her name was Della Brooks Walker. She was born as Della Brooks Walker. She was born as Della Brooks. She married a gentleman by the name of Clinton Walker. At that time, which was around the beginning of the century, she adopted the name, which was convention, Mrs. Clinton Walker. The original application of the National Register by the gentleman here, Kent Seavey, was in the name of Mrs. Clinton Walker. So her name is not Della Clinton Walker. Her name is Della Brooks Walker. Now, this makes a difference because her husband, Clinton Walker, died in 1944. She actually wrote the letter to Frank Lloyd Wright in 1945. So this was her project. She fought it through, she negotiated it, and it was Della's project from beginning to end. And if you read this, you would find this out. Now, number one, this property, as you know, is on the National Register, and it, as such, comes under the standards of the Department of the Interior. I'm not speaking actually to the presentation that was just given by the lady who was here earlier. What I'm concerned about is kind of a bigger picture. And I am a member of what's called the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy. This is a 501c3 nonprofit based in Chicago, Illinois, and that organization was founded 25 years ago to preserve and correct every standing Frank Lloyd Wright building in the United States. And since their founding, no Frank Lloyd Wright building has been demolished. Don't like to use the word demolish in this room, but that's not going to happen. I'm concerned about stabilization, and I know that this property came up before the California Coastal Commission, and it is not under your jurisdiction, but I, in summary, would like to urge that all of you in your positions stand behind the stabilization, which is the north wall on the erosion of that particular part of the property, and stand toe-to-toe with the Coastal Commission to preserve this property. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate your testimony.
Hi, David O'Neill again. I just wanted to say that, you know, I think everybody thinks that the house is very important for a number of different reasons. But there could be a tendency to think that the owner doesn't need the help with the taxes and that the city needs the money more. But that really wouldn't be treating him fairly as if somebody else who was doing it who maybe had less. And so I think it's just really important that we treat everybody the same. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Kent Seavey, Historic Preservation Consultant. I had the great honor to write the National Register nominations for this property. However, Mrs. Smith's document currently is the definitive work on this building. She went to extreme lengths to find everything we didn't find. So this is probably one of the best recorded Frank Lloyd Wrights there is. And I would admonish everybody here to, on the 19th of October, come to the Sunset Center at 5:30 in the evening and hear her speak about this house, its history, its real history. And she's a book signer, so she'll be signing some books there. I think you guys have done well. I would hope the current owner is going to practice what he preaches. I would strongly recommend a single addition to the document, and that would be to include an historic structures report as part of that document, and maybe in advance of some of the work to be done. That historic structures report would sort of close the gap on all the documentary materials needed. And thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to testify tonight? Anybody in the Zoom world wishing to speak? I don't see anybody you know of.
There's no hands raised on Zoom.
All right, to bring it back to council for deliberations, council members. I don't have a problem moving the item forward, frankly. Frank Lloyd Wrighty.
I'm a fan of the Mills Act. I think it plays an important role in our community, and so I would be report of this. I'm not sure exactly what historic structure report means, but I'd be happy to learn that too. If maybe Catherine, do you know, or maybe we could hear about that?
Is there any problem in including it?
It's not a city requirement, but it is a known type of document that you could compile about a historic building prior to undertaking a big rehabilitation project. And it's just, there's clearly a lot of great documentation available to us. And it would be taking what we know about the building and what work needs to be done and putting it in it's a very thorough report.
So that's the applicant. If you're there, Chris, are you still there? Would you care about this addition? If you're still listening.
Oh, I think I have to unmute him. Hold on.
Okay, Chris.
Yes, Chris Barlow too. Hello, hi, yeah, I'm here. I do kind of care. I don't really see why someone can turn up and proclaim that something that's not required should be added. I think it's unfair. If you impose it on us, fine. Of course, we'll do it. I don't think it's necessary. We're planning to do far more than is required. So my honest response is I don't really think it's fair for one of the city historians to impose something in a public forum.
All righty, thank you, Chris. Appreciate your input. Is there anybody else wishing?
My pleasure.
Oh, wait. All right, Jeff?
Yeah, thank you. So I think, everyone agrees that the house is historically important. I don't think there's any disagreement about that. But the historical importance of the house is actually not the subject of this hearing. The subject of this hearing is whether the city should enter into an agreement, a contract with the owner of the property that results in work that requires work to be done to the property and in exchange for, tax abatement. And I've spoken about this before, and I'm gonna speak about this again. Last night, I guess, we were sent a spreadsheet, of the results of last year's Mills Act reassessments. And it turns out that the discount, it turns out that the discount that the county is approving for our Mills Act contracts is not 45 to 55%. It's between 60 and 85%. And so the discounts that these houses, that we were sent last night, these 5 houses, 4 homes from last year that we approved, there's a 75% discount on the property tax rate. It's 75%. And this house, to just use this house as an example for a minute, this home is going to have an annual tax bill of $220,000 a year. And so 75% discount, again, just using the average of the numbers from the assessor, is $1,650,000 over the 10-year life of the contract. So I would point out first that using these numbers, the discount afforded to the homeowner is actually more than the $1.3 million that the homeowner has pledged to invest in the house. So first, there's $350,000 that's sort of unaccounted for, whose benefit will pass to the homeowner. And the reason I gave Catherine, a bit of a hard time, and I'm sorry about that before, about finding number 5, is it says, approval of the Mills Act contract will represent an equitable balance of public and private interests and will not result in substantial adverse financial impact on the city. But my question is, is it an equitable financial interest for, and no offense to Mr. O'Neill, someone who can afford a $22 million house, to result in, is it equitable that this person, that a homeowner that can afford a house, this house or a $3 million house or a $4 million house, takes, money from not just the city, but from the county and the school district as well, in order to do maintenance on a house that they purchased. Like I purchased my house, which is, 5 blocks from the ocean, and I get to paint it. This is a part of living in Carmel. The environment in which we live, is part of buying a house here. And that house is on the ocean, and we're going to see this in a little bit. Houses come with fickle problems, and old houses are old houses. And I'm okay, up to a point, and I'm okay up to a point in saying it's okay to relieve the homeowner of a tax burden that accomplishes preserving the historicity of the house. You know, the things that make the house historic, like maybe that's okay up to a point, you know, up to a point. But my point would be that, you know, painting a house, you know, doesn't preserve the historicity of the house. That preserves the house. Like that's something that we all as homeowners do. Like we want our houses to survive, you know, to survive and flourish. I think everybody in this room wants their house to do that. And so the problem I have is that this tax break, you know, this $1.65 million tax break is an enormous amount of money. And that money is coming not just from the city, but from the school district of Carmel. You know, it's $1 million that's basically going to come out of the school district's budget over the course of the next 10 years, $1 million. And it's $500,000 that's going to come out, $500,000, you know, or thereabouts, that's going to come out of the budget of the county. You know, we talk about homeless services and we talk about the things that the county does, and these things are important. You know, Carmel is a member of the community in which we reside. And so I appreciate very much that this is a very important, very historic house. I will not deny that. I think it's important to preserve the historic fabric of Carmel. I don't have any problem with that. The problem I have is with the nature, with the amount of money that we're talking about here, the amount of money that's going to be removed from the government coffers and go to this project. And I have a real problem with it, and so I won't be supporting the motion.
Alrighty, any other discussion? I would just say that I can't really put a price on historic preservation. I think it's got a value to it. I think it's important. So Jeff, I disagree with you, simply put.
And can I just add, I think that it's different. You can do whatever you want to your house. If you own a historic house, you can't. And so that's, I think, a handicap for people that buy a historic house. And also, to add to that, the financial part of it is I'm not sure what the person's property tax was that owned it prior to the current owner, but I imagine it was nowhere near $250,000 a year. So even at half that, at $125,000 or $110,000, whatever it's going to be, is a lot more than it was 2 years ago. So I will be supporting this.
Okay, Alessandra.
I'm really torn here because I do support historic preservation, as you all know, but I also am feeling that this Mills Act is slipping away from its original intent, which is to protect an everyday average homeowner so that they can get the tax break and invest that money in fixing up the house. And I feel that, unfortunately, the Mills Act is being abused, and I think it's strayed away from what its original intent is. So I do share some of Jeff's concerns about this.
Karen?
Yes, I have fallen out of love with the Mills Act the last year. And, you know, when we discussed this before, I tried to lobby for a cap on it. Like the county has a cap of $3 million for a residential property and $5 million for a commercial property. When the Mills Act was passed, this was before Prop 13, and it might have been in order to give mom and pop people an opportunity to fix their older homes and not allow them to deteriorate. It just so happens today when we opened up our property tax bill, we got this, you probably can't see this, but this is where does your dollar go? And this is the percentages. And out of every tax dollar that we pay in, our schools get 61 cents, the County of Monterey 15 cents, special districts 9 cents, successor agencies 8 cents, cities 6 cents, county libraries 1 cent, and water resources and community service areas 1 cent. So I take what Jeff was saying to heart, because it's not just Carmel taking a hit on taxes. It's our entire county, it's our schools, it's everything. And I have to say that I voted for the Mills Act on the auberge, and I was torn on that, and I sometimes regret my decision on that, because I think all of a sudden we're starting to see multiple properties that are purchased for several $1 million, and now the owners come forward and ask for this tax break, which we do have a facility to give them if we decide to do that. But I think it's like Alessandra might have just said, it's sort of strayed from its original purpose, and it's become, I think, onerous. And I think that we do need to take a pause. I think we need to take a break, and we need to reconsider what we are going to continue to do, because we have a lot of properties turning over 50 years old that might be candidates for this. And how much tax money are we willing to give up? I do think we are struggling with this. I'm struggling with this like Alessandra, and Jeff has laid out some pretty important things. So I really don't feel good about approving any more Mills Act until we have a handle on what we are already losing, because that was just 1 year, and what we potentially would lose in the future before we approve any more of these, especially to recent purchases of some of these properties. So I probably will not support this as well.
I think this is kind of a classic case of making a decision when people have got this expectation before them. I think it's a little late in these applications to go ahead and make those statements. We've led these people to believe that they have an opportunity to go ahead and get a savings on their taxes to go ahead and preserve the property. I think that's laudable, so I'm going to support it. I do not think we should be going ahead and capriciously picking poster children for what we want to set policy for.
With respect, this property came up, as staff pointed out, in 2019, 2020, this property came up, and I voiced exactly the same. I voiced exactly the same objections that I'm voicing today. And in 2019, we did not have the data that was presented to us about what happened with the Mills Act. I voiced objections based on us not knowing what the ramifications of us doing it, what the ramifications of us doing this, and what the tax loss was back then. And now we have data. Like, we have data that calls out, the 75% loss in tax revenue. So, I think that the issue has been laid out. I think I did that. I think I've been pretty consistent about it.
I agree, you've been consistent, Jeff. I just don't think that there's a policy in place. So without a policy in place, I don't think we're doing it ad hoc, so we're on a case-by-case basis. That's my problem with it.
Mayor, isn't our policy right now, if there's 5 findings, if what Catherine laid out, that's the policy. That's what we've adopted. We've said we could have no more than 15 in a 5-year period or whatever that was. I don't think we should ever look at somebody's income level on making a decision like this. That is none of our business. Absolutely none of our business.
The stuff, as I asked Catherine at the beginning of the hearing, the policy is one thing and the municipal code is another. Finding number five, which Catherine put in her thing, says, approval of the Mills Act contract will represent an equitable balance of public and private interests and will not result in substantial adverse financial impacts on the city. That's what the law says. And my determination is that there's a substantial financial impact. That's what I think. So regardless of what the policy is, I drew that distinction, during the question, regardless of what the policy is, this is what the law says. So
maybe we're interpreting it differently.
Okay.
I do support us coming back as a council and discussing the Mills Act and what changes we may need to make, and perhaps we may need to limit it to, one individual can only get one of these every 5 or 10 years or so, or maybe commercial properties will be excluded or something, because there is a financial impact.
And then I would be willing to support that if you wanted to make a motion in that way, that we were going to come back with a new policy or new directions. That would be fine, but what we have before us tonight should fall under what we talked about before.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Chris Miller, you bet you have your hand up, but you cannot testify. The public comment period's closed, and you've had your chance to put the city's jurisdiction is being discussed, or we're dealing with our responsibilities. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion? Good motion and a second.
Councilmember Barron?
No.
Councilmember Dramoff?
No.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Oh,
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Yes.
Motion failed.
All right, well, there's not much to do. We can make save time on the next one then, I guess.
Well, we could, so first, you know, we could.
We could.
I'm recused.
You could continue.
There is not, as far as I know, the hearing's not over. There's no motion that is passed.
Pardon me?
Yeah, you just denied
the
the
first
Mills
motion
application.
didn't. Is the hearing over?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Aren't
the
we
decision
voting
was no.
individually on these?
Yeah,
We voted individually on that one, yeah.
On the
They'll vote
Walker.
the next one.
But you do have one issue is the residential versus commercial. So I think that they should be definitely.
Well, I don't. I'm recused on the next one.
Yeah, but if you, my suggestion, Council, if you want to have a policy discussion about the Mills Act program, you could basically table the remaining applications and have that discussion before the end of the calendar year. That might help inform the remaining applications.
Well, that wouldn't. I'm sorry, but that doesn't seem fair to the first application.
So I would, you know, that is in fact why I'm asking whether the first hearing is over. So my feeling would be, I agree with Bobby, so my feeling is if the first hearing is not over because there hasn't been a successful motion yet, you know, the first motion didn't pass, so my question is, are we looking for another motion?
So should we
You know,
table
so my
all
question
five?
is, should we table all the rest of them?
Yeah.
And come back and then reconsider the first one along with the rest of them?
That I would concur.
That's specifically why I was asking whether the first hearing was over.
Yeah, and see, these were noticed as public hearing items, but as Mr. Pyrrhic has ruled in the past, it's a simple majority of the council members that don't have an issue with propinquity or other issues that can vote on them. So it's a simple majority, a minute action. There's no specific resolution or anything that has to be approved to approve a Mills Act contract. So again, I'm kind of thinking on my feet, and we'll turn to Mr. Pyrrhic, but I think that you can basically continue all of the rest of them if you would like to, and then we'll bring back at the next available council meeting similar discussion that we had back in March or April of this year about the Mills Act program. And then again, Brandon and I can work on the figures, the calculations, based on some assumptions about what the tax revenue loss, not only to the city is, but to the other jurisdictions that glean real property taxes, if that's helpful.
Fine. Fine, are you good formulating your thoughts, or did you have something you actually wanted to say?
Well, both. I sensed that there was some question about your options here. Since there has not been a final decision on agenda item 5, you could make a motion to continue those to a date to be determined, and then wait until you've had your discussion on the policy, and then reset those for hearing at a future date.
Do you have a motion to that effect?
So I'm sorry. So I would make I'm asking you the question, Brian. So we would make a motion to continue this hearing to, and I'm looking for the number at the beginning, to continue the hearing to a date uncertain, and then we would just we would sort of make the same motion one by one with the rest of the items.
Well, you could make it on all four at the same time.
Well, we're variously recused on the items. So.
Then you're gonna need separate motions. And the answer is, if you make the motion to a date certain, you don't have to renotice the hearings. But if it's not a date certain, then you will need to renotice the hearings. But I mean, renoticing the hearings is not any big deal.
I don't think noticing the hearing is a big deal.
It's not a big,
No.
it's not a big deal. We have kind of full agendas. As we move into the holiday season, the agendas are pretty full.
So you said, your druthers would be to just make it to a date uncertain?
Yes, sir.
And just so I'm clear, Brian, are we going to rehear all five? Are we going to rehear the one that we just heard and the other four?
It would be the one you just heard plus the other three. If the motion is successful and you say bring it back, then the answer is yes.
Okay.
All right, let's explain to the public what we're doing. I see some heads going east-west, not north-south, so they don't quite understand. So Brian, could you couch again what's happening here so everybody understands?
Well, you're going to have to vote on each of these four separately because apparently there's some conflicts on some of them. So you take them one by one. If the council wishes to hear these at a future date to be determined, somebody would make a motion, whoever's
But the intention is that we would go ahead and have a policy in place before the next hearing dealing with the Mills Act tax and the lots of monies to the city, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
You
we
would
have a discussion, we have some policy, instead of doing it on an ad hoc basis.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing here, we're doing it on a case-by-case basis. People coming forward with an expectation, they're gonna get approved and then they don't, and because we have this debate every time. Jeff's made the same point several times, it's a valid point, but we've never set policy on it, that's my problem. I think if we're gonna set policy, I'm fine with that then, but without policy, we're doing it capriciously, I think. So that's why I support the motion.
Absolutely.
I think the direction to staff would be to bring back the policy discussion, and then the motions to continue the items would be to a date to be determined, to be set after the resolution of the policy issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So if we have a motion on the first one, we can take a vote.
Okay, so I'll move to continue the first one until a date uncertain.
Second.
With the additional instruction about the direction to staff to have the policy discussion.
Yes, sir. And the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and I and others are having agenda review tomorrow at 1. So we'll see what's on November tomorrow.
Okay, this motion is just about the first one, right?
Yep, exactly. Okay. Motion, we have a second. Do we have any other discussion? Nova, would you call a roll, please?
Yes. Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, Jeff, you have to recuse yourself on the next one, right? Do you want to explain why?
I live near the,
Yeah, thank you very much.
live near the,
Okay. Don't go far.
So I don't think you need an agenda report,
No,
Council.
we're just going ahead. So I move approval, I move a continuance to the date uncertain on this item.
Second.
Same adopted reason.
Okay.
Previous meeting. Okay, we have a roll call. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Nova, would you call a roll, please?
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito? Councilmember
Yes.
okay. Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, Jeff is back. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is Lopez, Mills, which one?
Griffin.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Griffin, yeah. Griffin, Simpson, consider Mills Act application MA 23-117, historic Agnes Sporting House located 3rd Avenue North, 2nd Northwest of Unibrow, single-family dwelling.
I'll make a motion that we postpone it till further date.
I'll second it. Any other discussion? Could I get a roll call, Nova?
Yes. Councilmember Barron?
yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards?
Yes.
Mayor Potter?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I'm out of here. I live too close to the next project.
I'm recused. I have a property too close to this project.
Can you assign one of them to run the?
Oh, yeah. Jeff, will you run the meeting, please?
Yeah, thank you. So, hearing MA 2303, the Cypress Inn, same thing. I would make a motion that we continue this discussion to a date uncertain.
I'll second that.
Okay. Councilmember Barron?
Yes.
Councilmember Dramoff?
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito? Was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Motion carries. Thank you.
Future agenda items? Now's your chance.
None, please.
Okay, so we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did we get all four of those?
Yes, we got all four.
Yeah, we did,
Yeah.
Mr. Perry.
And then we have a closed session.
Pardon me?
Does the mayor need to come back to adjourn this meeting to go into the
I
next?
adjourned us.
You adjourned us? Okay, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I adjourned us. So I don't know if we're,
So I just ended that meeting. I'm going to open up a new Zoom meeting. Yeah, okay, okay.